So, Temporal here, and today we have with us Maxwell. Maxwell is currently a player for Converse University. He's also played on trials and contenders teams such as Drifters and the like in the past. But today, what we have you here for is you are going to be making the case that we should all be super excited about Overwatch 2, and it is the best thing since sliced bread. Is that me overstating your position, or is that about right?
A little bit.
A little bit? Okay. Okay. Fair enough.
Um,
Fair enough.
Hopefully optimistic, right? Realistically optimistic. Just
Oh,
based on what we've seen, based on what we know, things are going to be pretty good. But in terms of some things that we don't know about them.
okay. Okay. So I think most people would be somewhat concerned. I think if we sort of looked at how people were concerned, that sort of thing, we would get into a place where, how do I want to put this? We would get into a place where, we're going down to this 5v5 thing. It sort of seems like a gimmick. Like maybe we start there. That's the big thing with Overwatch 2, where, hey, it's a gimmick. There's nothing that inherently makes 5v5 better about the game. In fact, the tank synergy was some of the most obvious synergy in the game, and it felt really, really good when you were doing it right. And we're getting rid of that. And that's a core piece of Overwatch's identity, and all we get out of that is better queue time. So what? Like, isn't that going to make us hemorrhage tanks even faster than we already have? Or is that, hey, it's a marketing gimmick and it's worth it? Or no, the game really needs to be like that from a population balance perspective?
Well, first of all, Overwatch is a gimmick. The entire
Oh,
game is a gimmick.
ooh.
So are the characters. And it's
Well,
a very
okay,
fun gimmick that I
sure,
like a lot, right?
sure.
It depends on what you mean by gimmick, right? We didn't have it clearly defined, which is why I can say that.
That's true.
Um,
That's true.
but I think which is going to be a wild take for most people.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a bit of a tangent in its own, but it's up to you on whether or not you want to go on it. But I think that Overwatch 2 or Overwatch in any format but 5v5 is much more difficult to balance than 5v5.
Overwatch in any form but 5v5 is much harder to balance than 5v5. I don't know about that. I mean, I think 1v1s are probably the simplest thing to balance in the game. They get a little foolish. You eventually get to a point where, hey, let's
Within
just.
reason, Temporal. Within reason.
Oh, I'm supposed to be reasonable now, am I? Okay, okay.
Are you like, are you trying to egg me on? You're
A
trying to
little
make
bit,
this
little bit,
political?
little bit.
It's not going to work, buddy.
Okay,
It's not going
okay.
to work.
So talk to me. Why is 5v5 superior to 6v6 or 4v4?
Well, 4v4 would suck no matter what.
I
It
mean,
would
you
just
could
be
do one tank,
really
one
boring.
support, two DPS, right?
I play 4v4.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you could, right? But I think it'd just be too empty, way too empty, especially for the size of maps. There's other problems. But in
Sure,
terms
you
of
do have the existing
6v6, right, which
maps.
is something that we have no more precedent for 6v6, right? Um, is 6v6 the one of the biggest problems with making every role and hero in each role feel individually impactful while
Hmm.
being balanced is the problem with multiplication versus addition in terms of value, right? So what that means is DPS, just based on their numbers in their kit, get raw value that is additive. While tanks and supports, especially tanks and characters like Brigitte and Sombra, they get more multiplicative value than DPS, like traditional DPS. And so what you
Why?
see is it's because of the abilities. Good question. It's because of the abilities, right? DPS, you can just click heads and kill things.
Okay,
And so your individual impact is really high in that way.
okay.
But with tanks, it's about using your abilities at the correct timings. And more importantly, using your abilities with other abilities in tandem to steamroll the enemy or just make things more efficient.
I
And
mean, I don't
that
know. If I'm playing Ash, I really like having that Mercy with me to help steamroll the enemy. Like you're gonna need to give me a bit more there.
you're multiplying based off of addition.
I'm
But for
multiplying
tanks,
based
you're
off
just
addition.
multiplying based off of multiplication, right? It,
No. Like, how is a Mercy Beam different than a Zarya Bubble? If I push in with Reinhardt with a Zarya Bubble, that's one
I
thing.
thought
If I
this was
push
going to
in
be a discussion and not an antagonization,
Oh,
Temporal.
sorry, sorry. I mean, I'm not trying to egg you on too much here, Max. Sorry. So I don't mean to get too into the debate format here. Like, I am curious, but like, help me out here. Like, actually help me understand what is the difference between those. Then I'll take a little more discussion stance here.
So the difference between addition and multiplication is a little bit multifaceted,
Mm-hmm.
but it is particularly in how you are able to get value based on your team,
Okay.
right? In traditional open queue, for example, you see the most multiplication with goats, right? Just a really easy example. You've got supports and tanks multiplying each other's value and making it so where DPS just couldn't catch up. And then they buffed DPS up to unreasonable levels. And then that addition was able to overpower the multiplication in certain circumstances if executed properly.
I
Um,
mean, I agree with the history there that they buffed DPS up to wild levels, and part of why they had to do that is because the synergies from the extreme amount of peel, mitigation, restore that existed with supports and tanks and how those interacted. I agree the synergies there were better than what the DPS were getting synergy wise. I'm just not totally sure I see. I mean, I could sort of get this as like a I'm still not quite seeing this multiplication versus addition difference thing. Like, I agree there were synergies there in terms of, hey, some people get really into the Lucio plus Brigor is too much. Some people get into the sustained healing plus barriers is too much. Regardless, the full level of peel that existed in Goats was too much. I agree. Um, but I'm still not quite trying to understand. Like, I legit don't understand what you mean by addition versus multiplication here.
whenever I take a pause, doesn't mean I'm done with my point.
Okay, go ahead.
Um, so when it comes to multiplication versus addition, I want us to get this definition out so we can continue the conversation. But
Please.
addition, it's a little bit hard because it's a little bit loose, right? Each character has different levels. So I'll just give some examples, right? Tracer, she doesn't combine with any other character directly, right? She can add her own value to other characters' value in terms of damage, right? Following up on their damage or something else, right? But she can't directly make another person's play better besides that additive value. While tanks and supports can. They can, for supports, they can just keep you alive longer. They can nano boost you, right? That's an ultimate example, but still. And then tanks, especially, can combine their abilities with you, regardless of the character you are on, to make your play directly better through DMing, bubbles, shielding, just existing in front of you, right? And all of that is much more multiplicative. And so what that leads to is that lower ranks,
Mm-hmm.
particularly from 0 to 4,000, 40, 200, you see a lot of the value that is very direct and much more additive, like Roadhog, Zarya, Lucio, Ana, very obvious, Kree stuff.
Okay.
It has much more value. But once you get past that and you get to players that know how to coordinate as a team, those multiplication aspects greatly outweigh the additive aspects. To where the additive aspect is a second thought, you'd much rather focus on your tank and support line before your DPS to have a strong core if you really want to succeed. Now, of course, DPS is
So
still important, but you need that core.
can I get into here just for a second to make sure I understand where you're going with this and where I think you're going with this? I think what you're saying, and stop me if I'm misunderstanding, is the difference really is that DPS aren't so good at donating resources. Like, you can have a Zarya throw a bubble, a DM give defense matrix, a Mercy give a damage boost, a Zen send a Harmony or Discord orb out, and those give resources that other players can use, be they DPS or non DPS players, and DPS by and large aren't as good at giving resources other than the threat of eliminating something, dragging attention, that sort of thing. Is that the point that you're making there?
That's the core difference.
Okay.
My point is that, especially as you get higher up in level, but even just in general, right? Because tanks are multiplicative, they become way stronger at higher ranks, but you need to have them at a certain minimum power so lower ranks can still have fun on them, right? We saw this problem whenever they got buffed to hell, and then they got nerfed to hell, and they're in the pretty much the most balanced state you can have. And then you've got the other side where DPS couldn't do anything because the multiplication of tanks was too good. So the problem is that individually, it's hard to make tanks feel really fun and impactful whenever you have two tanks. And then you also need to have healing be strong to make up for the fact that you have two massive health pools to keep up with the tanks. And then you have to
Mm.
have strong DPS that are really strong and sometimes even unfairly strong to the more squishy characters just to be able to keep up with the amount of damage you need to do to tanks. It
So
kind of scales everything up.
So the synergy is just too powerful, and they can't balance the game across about 4700 SR of rating because the bottom
No,
4200 of SR just can't is not properly using that synergy, and that synergy is too good as you move up. So it's like the
it's
Reaper
too
problem.
counterintuitive.
Okay.
It's one of the reasons why you see high level players 4200
Mhm.
just suck whenever they're in 4300 plus lobbies.
Mhm.
Is you've got these other players that know what they're doing, know how to punish these mistakes. To where Roadhog just sucks, Reinhardt's bad. Suddenly, every single character is bad. If you pull up a play time or
Mhm.
pick rates for the different ranks,
Sure.
you will see a complete 180 flip once you reach Grandmaster. And that is so jarring for the vast majority of players to where, sure, you should balance. I'm of the opinion you should balance to the highest level of play
Okay.
to a certain degree, but there's only so much you can do that without alienating your casual players to where your casual experience is bad. And if you don't have a casual experience that is good,
You don't have again.
you don't have a competitive experience. So what's the
Right.
point of the highest level of play?
Okay. Um, I'm with you there. I'm definitely with you that the game has to feel good, has to have enough buy-in from the population at large for the competitive scene to really matter. I'm with you there, and I understand where you're going for here of like, hey, people who understand how to abuse synergy are way better than people that don't, and that's why you see such a stark difference. You say it shows up at about 4300 on the ladder. That's possible, but like you'll also see you can find diamond and you can find a diamond tank line that are duo queuing that understand how to abuse their synergies, and yes, they will outperform the people that don't. But is that like a problem? I think that's one of the things that feels good about Overwatch, for example. And I pick diamond, I could pick gold, I could pick plat, I could pick you wherever we want to go with this, where it's like that's fine. I mean, I'm not sure the specific point on the ladder really matters, but isn't that one of the thing that feels good about Overwatch? And if you don't have that, hey, this synergy is really important, is it still Overwatch, or should it really be, just sort of like not the team-based game that we've all come to love and really enjoy? And, some of, I think, what makes it Overwatch is how different scrims are from ladder. What do you think about that?
So you make a good point, right? And this is something that it's even for me who hasn't played much tank relative, obviously, to tank players. It's also one of the coolest feelings, even when I was playing more tanky DPS characters,
Sure.
to feel like I was being supported by two other massive health pools to
Hmm.
do my job, right? It's very unique, very satisfying within Overwatch. But I think the problem is one, the vast majority of your player base isn't able to properly abuse that, not only on a team play aspect, but there's also a certain amount of individual skill,
Hmm.
both mechanical and decision making, that you need to be able to properly abuse that. And then the other problem is that it makes snowballing and oppressive games much worse, right? It's a problem within Overwatch where you feel helpless. And if your team, even at those low ranks, is being rolled by a tank line that's just better, you as a tank, right? If you're solo queuing or even if you're just a worse duo, you're probably not going to feel like you're having fun. If you're like two duos of tanks against each other, then maybe it can be fun. But then if you're still getting rolled, against those better tanks, the rest of the team isn't having fun. So that's in a best case scenario, 4 out of the 6 players are getting rolled and not having fun because they don't feel like they have any individual agency. It's the same problem. It's less tanks now and it's more supports. It's
But
flipped around to where healing is too strong instead of tanking, and that's what makes things annoying besides stunts and everything like that.
how is that different than a widow taking over the game? I mean, we've had metas where it felt like, okay, ladder is decided by which team is the better widow. And yeah, maybe the Tracer's going to be able to create some openings. Maybe the Winston's going to be able to find a way to get out them. Maybe the Diva's going to be able to synergize and create some good widow peak timings for her to get value. But where it feels like the widow is hard taking over the game. And like, that's not the meta right now, but we've had those before. And those are still heroes that you can hard takeover with the widows, the tracers of the game, where, hey, why is it better to have something where you can just individually take over with that rather than, hey, their team is beating us, but at least they're beating us because 2 of their players are better than 2 of our players, as opposed to they just have 1 player that's taking over.
So that's a good point. I don't think that it is necessarily better, right? Any other individual situation is not better or worse because they're both equally bad, right? And from a player perspective,
Okay.
I think the difference is how corely fundamental it is to the gameplay experience. Because Widowmaker, if now the Overwatch team doesn't have the best precedence with nerfing a character into the ground that is broken,
Sure.
um, they've gotten better. We'll have to see how it is in Overwatch 2, especially on the Overwatch League broadcast, because we know things are going to be broken, and
Hmm.
that's honestly pretty exciting. And I love watching that stuff because they'll also probably be patching every tournament, whatever. But the difference is that one is corely fundamental to the game, and you cannot nerf a character to get away from it, while the other is okay. We're just going to make a Widowmaker worse, and now it's not a problem, right? One is way more complicated to solve, and you can't solve it from just a simple balance patch. It has to be a core fundamental change, which is why the devs have decided that 5v5 is or could be the best option if they do it right.
Okay. And do you think we'll have a lesser issue? Because the synergy between Zen and Ball or Zen and Tracer or, Pharah and Mercy is still pretty good. I agree tank synergies are probably the strongest in the game, but like those are still some pretty good synergies. Do we think we've simplified this problem enough that okay, hey, now it's going to work, or do we feel like this is sort of like the okay, we're going to do roll lock because there's less total combinations that the devs have to balance, but then the devs don't necessarily do a better job of balancing after. Like I remember that argument in favor of the 222 lock was, hey, it's going to be so much easier for the devs to balance and that's going to give us a better game, but it didn't necessarily then, or maybe people feel it did.
Eventually,
Eventually,
it
eventually, we went through quite a bit of double shield that people hated before
did.
then, as I understand it. But
Yeah.
and then it's been balanced, but it's kind of been balanced for the last year because it's been a very light touch total, which I also think people don't necessarily like. So I don't really think we necessarily got they understand the game better and can balance it better when there's less total combinations. And I'd be concerned that we're looking at the same thing here, where you're viewing this from a hey, we're taking away some of the strongest, most powerful synergies in the game, but there's still some pretty good synergies there. And like, yes, simplifying the Rubik's Cube, simplifying it from a game of chess to a game of checkers makes it easier to balance in some ways, but that doesn't matter if they still can't master checkers. And I don't mean to take too hard a shot at the devs here. It's really, really hard to do so. And like I get to sit here and analyze this game, you get to sit here and analyze this game, whereas the devs have to do a lot more than just analyze the game. They have to code it, they have to figure out, what makes sense from a lot of other things than just the game balance that's going on there. So I don't mean to shoot too hard there, but like, should we believe that hey, once they remove that synergy it's going to be easier and better to balance, or is this just going to be okay, now the abusive thing is the support synergies are too good, or the way that certain supports can enable certain DPS are too good, or the way that Ball and Tracer work together is too good? You see my concern here?
Yeah, and it's actually one of the things that I was more concerned about until they acknowledged it, at least in short ways, right? So a big problem with Overwatch, and it's just kind of it's you can see it everywhere, right? The
Sure.
reason why Reinhardt is bad, besides other there's a lot of other reasons, right? But one
Okay.
of the reasons why Reinhardt is bad is that he basically relies on 2 other characters at least to get his proper value because he needs to close distance, right?
Okay.
That means Lucio, you need a Lucio every single time if you want to play Lucio at a high rank properly, or play Reinhardt, and even at lower ranks too.
Right.
And at least a diva that is really good or a high healing output support. That
Yeah.
means that you can't have Reinhardt be too powerful individually because he relies on other characters to get his value. It's the same thing with Pharmacy, right?
Hmm.
Pharah cannot be good individually to where she fits in other comps because she is too good with Mercy. And it's the same problem with Discord in a lot of ways. Fortunately, at least they've acknowledged Discord, that they're looking at ways to make it so it's not on tanks all of the time. So we'll probably see a change to that. Because if
Okay.
they say they're working on looking at something, most of the time they're pretty confident at it. By the time that they say it, they're like,
Sure.
"We like the direction this is going, so we're going to say it." So most of the time, that's the way it goes.
Right.
That's how
Devs
it.
don't.
That's
Yeah.
precedence.
Yep.
Um, and then for Mercy, for example, in the most recent custom or experimental patch with the content creators, we saw Violet had a very interesting suggestion for how to make Mercy less of an individual pocket character, to where her healing decreased the longer she was on one target, which means that she's worse at pocketing Farah, but then you give her power in other ways to make up for that lack, which means that you can buff Farah, make her more impactful in other compositions, right? It's that kind of thing, and that gives me hope that the fact that they saw that change and they consciously had to think about it and implement it gave them an idea about that kind of thing. And I'm hoping that they kind of design Overwatch 2. This is more of a hope.
Okay.
It doesn't have much precedence outside of like the Discord comment change and and an experimental card with content creators, but um I'd like to see them balance specific combinations in a way to where those combinations aren't objectively better than other combinations, which will keep the game much more even feeling and fresh. Now, of course, there will still be synergies that work better, but you don't want them to be blanketly more powerful than another combination or another set of combinations. You want variety to be possible.
I mean, you do want variety, I agree, but like again, I feel like those synergies are a lot of what makes Overwatch Overwatch. Like the idea of teamwork, the idea of, hey, this isn't just a hardcore, how good are your mouse aim mechanics type shooter. Like this was a more, we're going to invite in a broader audience and we're going to make our game play a bit different than others. We're going to have some of these MOBA influences. We're going to have some of this synergy type stuff. Like I do worry a little bit if you're going, hey, we can have the synergies only be a little bit better than the normal stuff. I agree the game might be less frustrating. That might take away some of Overwatch's most frustrating aspects of like, oh, I'm losing because my Zarya's throwing when, I'm playing Winston, or, that sort of thing, because like it does feel in Overwatch to a lot of people like it's harder to overcome someone who's not performing on your team than to punish someone, not performing on the other team. I know that's mostly their mistake, but that is what a lot of players feel. And I think, that's both a blessing and a curse for Overwatch, but it's also what makes Overwatch Overwatch. And do you think just like getting rid of that monkey paw or whatever we want to call it here is going to be great for the game? Or do you think, hey, that it's not actually going away?
I think for the health of the game, it's going to be better, but it really depends on the individual. So the thing is, there's a couple things. One, the people who stayed in Overwatch at this point
Hmm.
are either committed to the game, like myself, or they like how it is. Right?
Sure.
I'm committed and don't like how it is. Other people, like yourself, really like the macro strategy perspective.
I've been called out.
And
Yeah, no, go ahead.
yeah, um, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
I think there will definitely be a shift away from that macro, but you aren't losing coordination, right? People, because it's been so unoptimal for so long, people forget that coordinating with your DPS and making space for them or healing them just when they need it so they can win the duel and kill another person, right? That is very satisfying.
Sure.
It's precedent right now to where a DPS goes on a far flank to try and get a kill on their own because they can't get because it's more boring and less fun to get through the tanks and supports, right? That's the precedent. So you can't coordinate with your DPS, and it's also hard to get coordinate with your DPS because you also would have to get through the tanks and supports. And by the time you're getting through the tanks and supports, you might as well just stick with your tanks and supports and pocket your tanks as a DPS and a support to allow them to win the tank battle, excluding certain circumstances like ball comps, which people almost universally dislike.
I don't think people universally dislike ball comps. I think low on
From my,
ladder. Go ahead.
I've heard a lot of complaints. That's all I'm saying.
Sure, but we also
People
heard a lot of.
dislike it.
I think that's just because we've been in this meta for. We've probably had what, like 14 months total of ball comp being meta at this point. Like, I think that's all that's going on. We had a little bit of
It's
a
not
break.
even meta. We've got double shield. We've got brawl too. People just dislike it more than other things. Now, people dislike double shield too. It also sucks.
Right. Like
Brawl,
that's
brawl is the most forgivable, but
right. But we had goats. I mean, like, I think people just get tired when metas stick around too
no
long. Right?
Overwatch metas are very fun. Overwatch
Overwatch
is
isn't
only
fun.
fun whenever there is no meta, except
Okay.
for goats
Well, I think
and
goats was
dive.
fine, and I think dive was
Well,
fine too, and I think
I
ball is
like
fine
goats
too.
except for the fact that I had to play Brig.
Okay. Yep.
That was
Yep.
my only problem with goats,
Yep.
besides the fact that it was only 6 characters and there were very few FPS elements, right?
Sure.
So I think this is more of a prediction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Overwatch 2 is going to play not like any meta has played before.
Okay.
And if I were to call out any meta but dive meta, people would be upset because notoriously these metas were disliked. So I will not, because it wouldn't be a true, accurate description of how Overwatch 2 is going to be played. So instead, I'm going to change the conversation forcefully,
Okay.
temporal away from you, to a pondering, right? I've got
Okay.
a question for you.
Shoot.
How many individuals can so you're a tank.
Sure.
How many individuals on the enemy team can you tank at any given point in time?
One, and not for very long. Like, to be perfectly honest, people seem to not understand this. Like, Overwatch still is a shooter, and when it comes to tanking, your tank isn't like some MMO. Okay, I need the dragon facing me and biting me while I've got my shield and a healer pumps me full of heals. Overwatch is still a shooter where you're sending your tank out there because you're sending your tank out there to break a corner, not because your tank can handle the whole team shooting at it, but because your tank effectively has like some body armor on. Let's pretend like they're a SWAT team member, they have some body armor on, their arms are still open, their head is still open, their legs are still open, but they're slightly better equipped than the other 5 people on your team who don't have any body armor on their chest. So how many people can they tank? I mean, the answer really is, hey, they're just a slightly beefier version of a DPS with a little less finishing power.
So let's add a support to that equation. Would you think it would go from 1 to 2 to where
Um,
you can tank 2, maybe 2.5 people for a little bit if if you juggle your cooldowns correctly?
yeah, I mean, I think you effectively can, with some level of sustain, do it. I don't think you can really do it in
Now
the
this is
sense that
this is
people try
not
to do it.
you're not in the middle of nowhere. You have map geometry to play around.
Sure. Then yes, with some
You're
map
just trying to
geometry
hold
to work
space.
with, you can slow things down and you can sand in the gears 2 to 3 people there. Sure.
Yeah. So the difference between Overwatch 1 and Overwatch 2 is the amount of tanks on the screen. And
Mm-hmm.
we've covered 2 tanks plus 2 supports can basically tank the entire roster, which is why metas like Brawl and Double Shield exist in the first place. If they couldn't, then ball comps and monkey comps, dive comps would just exist all the time. And you remove one of those. If you try to play a tank in Overwatch 2 like a main tank or even like a face tanking off tank
Mm-hmm.
like you do in Overwatch 1, you're just going to feed and die. You're going to feel helpless. Overwatch 2 is going to be more about it's space control in the same way we understand it, but it looks a little bit different, right? So instead of having the tanks control the space and then DPS pressure off angles, right?
Okay.
you'll now it'll be different for different metas, right? But a very simple, basic layout will be you have a tank and maybe a support holding a lane, keeping that lane strong. It could be, it's probably a bigger area than what a DPS would be able to control because DPS is more about the threat. Once people walk into it, then you threaten. But as tanks, you just occupy it. You are the space, right? So you occupy that probably larger amount of space. And then you have a support with a DPS
Hmm.
occupying a different side of space where the support is from safety and the DPS is helping. And then you have an agile DPS, right? Very simple. This is a very simple, bare bones layout. Of course, you can counter it, whatever. But the point is, your tank will not be tanking for your entire team. It will not be tanking the entire enemy team because it's so much easier to get around the tank. You'll just have a tank occupy very important map space, give them all the support that they need if they need it,
Okay.
and then you'll have your supports and DPS make up the rest as a sort of agile front where you have sometimes they're defensive, sometimes they're aggressive, and your tank can move according to that. Right? It's less of a direct brawl, less of a hard dive. It's not really anything that we have seen in Overwatch besides whenever everybody was bad at Overwatch, but even then we didn't really have strategies, right? So we don't have the initial burst engage of dive. Now you can still do that, whatever. There's caveats, there's an asterisk to everything that I say in terms of these predictions. But the point is that it's not going to be as much of a MOBA meta game,
Okay.
right? But it will still have a deep amount of strategy, especially based on the amount of compositional variety and team play and timing, especially timing more than almost anything else will be very important to when you're engaged, when you back up. If your tank's getting pushed out, you need to come in as a DPS to help them. The coordination will definitely not be lost. It'll just be a shift from, tanks and supports coordinating to enable your DPS,
Hmm.
unless your tanks are the ones being enabled, but whatever. That's a complicated mess. But
Sure. So I guess I'd look at that and go, I don't understand why you think we're going to get that. Because it sounds to me like what you described is, hey, we're going to have like the DPS sort of occupying some space, ready to attack, ready to actually sort of be the front line and fight. The tank occupying what is maybe the most critical spot, but then maybe they're not going to be the ones to start. They're instead going to be the
well, it
backup that
depends.
goes and reinforces a fight. So like I'm not understanding, and it's going to be less Moby. I'm not following how you get there.
Well, it depends. I was thinking in terms of specifically, you've got a non-agile tank,
Okay.
maybe a roadhog, maybe it's I don't know whatever Sigma or Rissa
Roadhog,
looks like,
Zarya, Sigma, sure.
with a support. So they're strong. They're able to hold that space. And then
Hmm.
you've got like Soldier Zen or Soldier Ana in the back, and then you've got a Tracer, right? That's one version of what it could look like. Of course, you will also have, the divey compositions where you have a Winston, Lucio, Moira,
Hmm.
and then you have Tracer Sombra, which may just be the meta. We don't know what it's going to look like, but Tracer
Right.
Sombra looks really strong. You'll still have that, right? And then you'll still have the really pokey sniper bunker, probably. I don't know how they'll take bunker because it doesn't look like there are any bunker characters in Overwatch 2.
Well, they don't know how to balance them, and I think what you run into there is they are struggling with them because they really, really want to be able to go, hey, we want Orisa to be able to push through chokes, but if you make Orisa strong enough to push through chokes, or you make Sigma strong enough to push through chokes without the help of another tank, when they play a defensive bunker, you are never going to break them. So I think
I
they've sort of
think
got themselves into a hole there.
I think there's two problems. One, there was a character design problem.
Yes.
Like, um, I mean, original Orisa was fine, but Sigma's the whenever you have too strong of a generalist like Brigida or Sigma, they will either be useless or incredibly broken. Sigma is a special case because he has very defined weaknesses. Brigida doesn't as much, which is what makes her more annoying at very high level play, is that she's almost universally good except for Brawl. Um, and then, so the problem with Orisa and the
Hmm.
problem that the devs have, and I don't know if they're going to solve it, if they've changed their mindset or whatever, but they struggle with allowing a character to be niche.
Sure,
Um,
they do.
it's okay to have a niche character. Like I love the original Treehouse Bunker Orisa comps. They
Yep.
were really unique. They were really cool, and they were very interesting. Now the problem was her design was such that she relied a lot on her team to get into those positions in the first place,
Yep.
and then people might watch these really cool, Soul Dynasty versus Dallas Fuel. I remember this stuff. Um, Bunker comps on Anubis, and then they try to do it, and they just feed because the character is shit.
Hmm.
So they need to design with these ideas in mind. I think they've gotten now. Obviously, we only have a few characters for reference, right? But
Sure.
based on how I believe them to think and how they're learners, they aren't going to make the same mistake that they've made in the past, unless that mistake is possibly inaction, which is different. Um, I don't think they're the type to make the same mistake in the past, especially with the new leadership and everything. They're very open to new ideas and changes to make things better.
Okay.
I am hoping that they design certain characters with the idea that they might be niche, right? To be and fit that niche so that they can be cool gimmicks that are also good if you play them successfully. That
I don't
also don't throw for your team where they might not understand how to play with it.
I don't think we're ever going to see that again. I think that's too far into like maybe, but I think they've intentionally designed characters away from being specialists and into being more generalist, and we've seen that reworks of Sim,
It's really
reworks of
hard.
Torb, reworks of like Sombra to make all these characters more similar. And I think one of the reasons they've done that is we're never getting rid of one tricks. People
Sim
are
is
going to one trick on ladder and play the hero that they want to play, and because they're going to do that, we need these heroes to be flexible enough because again, we can't just balance around 4600, 44, 4500 level play, right?
honestly, I think Sim is a great example of a niche done right. Now,
Old or new?
obviously, she's in the new one.
Okay.
Because obviously she's not a tank. It's a little bit harder for a tank because of how tanks fundamentally work. I don't know if it'd be easier or harder to do in Overwatch 2, but for DPS at least, right?
Hmm.
Symmetra is both viable in solo queue because if you use her turrets and her teleport correctly,
Hmm.
the faster respawn, and then
Sure.
if you position yourself correctly, you will just farm people. Her damage output is insane if
People have
you're
been
smart.
underestimating Symmetra ever since the rework, for sure. Yep.
Symmetra is very strong,
Yeah.
and she also has her niche viabilities in high level play on certain maps, right? It's kind of she
Less
is
niche
the
than most
best
people think.
example of a niche character done well.
Okay. Okay. She's the best example of a niche character done well. Um, okay. I think I can get behind that. I'm not 100% I agree, but I see that. I think what works though is while she's really strong in those king of the hill type situations where she can maybe preset for that first fight, getting there first is important and she can set up on turrets. Yeah, she's usable enough. She's okay enough in her strength even when she's playing outside of her strength. So she's a strong enough generalist, and you think she's sort of the model of like where she's strong but she's not oppressively strong, and where she's not strong she's not too weak. Is that how I should understand that?
Yeah, and it's also she's also very viable on other maps to like counter swap.
Sure.
If they're running hard double shield, especially if they don't have a brig, you can just go sim May brawl and run over them. And if they do it wrong, they'll probably just fall. Now, of course, there's always the execution barrier or whatever, but they'll
Yes.
probably just fall apart. Um, it's but at the same time, not only is it really, really hard to properly design a character from the get go with that in mind, I think it's also a little bit of a barrier to entry,
Hmm.
especially if you think of it from a developer point of view, right? They spend months working really hard designing these characters in terms of gameplay. Then you've got voice acting, they do a great job. You've got the
Sure.
character lore, the character personality, you've got the visuals, the effects, you've got all of the different stuff, right? As a developer, you really want people, even in smaller numbers, to be able to pick up a character and feel like they can play it and have success.
Yes.
And so I think it's really incredibly difficult to design niche characters to success, especially as you're designing the character. I think it's much easier to have smaller sub niches instead of hard niches to
Sure.
where, Torbjorn's more defensive, but he can go aggressive. But after he uses overload, he's really punishable
Yep.
unless he plays in turret, right? It's that back and forth.
Right, but he's much
Um,
more of a generalist than he
New
used to be.
Sombra,
Yeah.
besides the like they're all more generalists. New Sombra, New Bastion. New Sombra was overtuned. New Bastion was undertuned, but that was
Okay.
basically just in numbers.
Let's
Their kits were fine for the
let's
most part.
let's step back a level though, because
Okay.
we sort of went into, hey, niche hero design, and I don't think that they're going to get much more niche than they are right now. I think they've gone more back towards generalist. You were
Yeah.
pointing out, hey, you think they've done a good job of, like, the level of niche that they're hitting is good, and I'm good with you there. I'll match you there. They are hitting a good level of niche versus general on the balance for the heroes that they are going niche with. But the point that we were serving there, if we back up a step, was, I mean, we'd really gotten there from Orisa, and we'd really gotten to Orisa from how is Overwatch 2 going to play. And I think how Overwatch 2 is going to play is pretty theoretical. If you feel like you
It
have a
is.
good design and, like, hey, this is going to be really fun because tanks are less impactful, they're less doing the match, I think that could be an interesting thing, and I'd want to hear it. If not, I'd probably take us, to a different portion of Overwatch 2, such as, okay, well, do we want to talk about, since you started to go into this, new leadership that they have?
I want to step on that in a moment,
Sure.
but just in your moment, I think tanks, the way tanks are going to play, this goes on to the multiplication thing, right? They have less of
Sure.
an ability to multiply with other tanks, but that means you're able to give them kits that are more additive,
Hmm.
but they're still the most multiplicative characters in the game, based on our understanding of those terms.
Sure.
So what you'll find is that bad tanks will be bad, and good tanks will be good, both in terms of like it's all about execution. But then as you get better as a tank, you'll also have better timing and better team play, to where tanks will feel much more individually impactful while being less oppressive because there's only one of them.
Tanks will feel more individually impactful and feel less oppressive. Help me
Yep.
wrap my head around that.
So, we talked about how the multiplication problem with two tanks is
Synergy.
just
Yep.
oppressive, right? It's the synergy.
Hmm.
Um, and at the same, like that makes it a balancing problem because for you need to have them be a minimum power so that they and a maximum power be pretty much at the same point, because otherwise they don't feel strong individually and they suck, or they're too strong together and everybody else suffers.
Well,
We've
if they're
seen that in precedent.
right, if they're too strong together, we get goats. If they're too weak, we get something a little bit like a Valorant complaint of quarter holding simulator, of no one is willing to break chokes, break corners, because a Widow just gets deleted, a McCree just
Mhm.
gets deleted, a Mei just gets
Roadhog meta,
deleted if they walk through a
season
corner.
3.
Right. So those are sort of the two extremes, and we need something where they can break corners and not just feel like they're going to get eliminated 70-80% of the time by breaking the corner, because no one will start fights, like, oh, or when they have to start fights, it's just going to absolutely suck and no one's going to want to do it. But we also don't want them just to be like, okay, runaway train type levels of power, which we feel they can have if the other team, doesn't have equally good tank synergy. Is that
Yeah,
the
yeah.
understanding?
So
Okay.
I'm gonna lay down my calculus because I was reminded of it. This
Hmm.
is my calculus for the entire game of Overwatch summarized.
Sure.
Um, maybe I shouldn't have said that because I might have lost it a little bit.
It's
Um,
okay.
Tanks are incredibly powerful together, and they have a large health pool. You combine that with supports, you have a lot to get through. So you need tanks individually to be strong, or else they just feel bad to play. But you can't have them be too powerful. And so there's a minimum and a maximum around the same point, and then you have healing. So you need DPS to be a certain level of powerful that is also rather high,
Hmm.
at least in terms of being able to burn tanks. Because otherwise, it'll feel impossible to get through tanks and supports combined. Because this is the game, this is 6v6 we're talking about. No
Okay.
more individual niche situations. You need to give DPS the individual power to get through tanks, especially because they aren't multiplicative and can't participate on that macro level. They need to be able to destroy tanks because otherwise they'd never be able to touch them. And so you need to have this minimum maximum for tanks.
Okay.
You need to have supports be able to keep up with the high damage output of tanks and DPS and supports, regardless of what the meta is and what supports tanks and DPS you are playing. It's a mess. And
Okay.
so once you remove a tank, you are down tanking. So you're able to, well, obviously you can nerf damage numbers
Mhm.
because there will be less tanking on the field. You can nerf healing numbers because you won't have to heal as much of a health pool, right?
Okay.
Which means that you can also further downscale other damage to where you can focus more on smaller utility and smaller upgrades to where there's much more easily balanceable and designable with one less tank. And they have so much more freedom that they're able to explore now that otherwise they had no ability to.
Okay, I want to go back to that freedom because I'm curious about that freedom, but I first want to get into 2 points there because you laid out two things as premises that I'm not sure I agree with. One of the
Okay.
things that you laid out as a premise there was, hey, your healing needs to be really powerful to keep up, to keep up with the damage. And the other thing that you laid out there was your damage needs to be really powerful to chew through the tanks. And I'm not sure I agree with either of those because prior to GOATS, prior to Overwatch League, we played Dive, and prior to the existence of Moira and Brig, the game was played frequently, not always, but frequently backwards to front instead of front to back, where we went, no, we're going to take out your supports, your backline first, and your team is going to fall apart, as opposed to front to back of we're going to take out your tanks, and then after your tanks are taken out, we'll go through your team. So,
Uh,
like, in metas, especially like this one where we're in the ball meta, you do not have to take down the tanks first. Now, tanks do a good job of controlling space, and you might say maybe this is the key. Now in 5v5, tanks can control less space, but there's the same number of lanes, so it's easier to get at people to then take apart the team. But I don't think this is purely an output standpoint. We could just delete Brig. I could just make the Samito argument here and be like, no, we just delete Brig and everything fixes itself.
so, are we gonna go back to those points?
I kind of want to because the
No,
direction. Okay, go ahead.
I got lost in the sauce a bit.
Sure.
So you gotta name your 2 points, and
Sorry.
then I'll go to
Sorry,
one
no
of them.
problem. So the 2 points that I was going for there is you specifically said that because as you're going through this, we need DPS to be high enough to delete tanks. You're talking about the minimum and maximum strength level of a tank, and you need DPS to be strong enough to damage and take down tanks, but you also need supports to be strong enough to heal up tanks. And I'm not really sure I agree with either of those. You can have a low support game. It's not what we have in particular right now, but you can have supports be
Okay,
weaker
I'll
instead
stop
of
you there.
tanks
I'll
being
stop you
weaker.
there so I can go to and
Please,
elaborate.
please.
So, for the first point, you need DPS to be strong to be able to burn through tanks, right? It
Sure.
kind of both of these points kind of add to each other
I agree.
because because first of all, shielding. There's kind of three core ways to abuse tanks, especially whenever they are synergized, and
Mm-hmm.
almost exclusively when they are synergized. It is the balance of three different resources. You've got contemporary shielding,
Okay.
which almost every composition has.
Yep.
Then you've got your health pool,
Yep.
and then you've got your other tanking abilities, your miscellaneous, like your defense matrices and your grasps, right?
Sure. Yep.
Those three core cooldowns, excluding things that are more disruption based, like ball or whatever, are tanking. When synergized, are very strong. So you need DPS, especially in terms of burst, right? I was talking more in terms of burst. Now they've nerfed tanking and healing somewhat to the point where over time damage can be impactful. They've buffed soldier, whatever. But the point is that there will always be moments in Overwatch 1, regardless of how you balance the game, where a tank gets blown up.
Yep.
Unless you have another tank that is good, right? So especially in solo queue or in comp, even if you're playing with your friends, there will be times where a tank just gets deleted because DPS are designed to take advantage of the few opportunities that tanks and supports to give duoed
Sure.
or combined. And they need to be able to get through that, which means they'll always get blown up, right? And then also on the support point of supports being needing to be able to heal tanks
Hmm.
is that when you have two tanks, any downtime of the tank feels bad, especially if you're playing a really strong tank like Reinhardt or somebody who's designed to be in the front. Now, you can make an argument that Ball can go collect megas. Winston's all about the give and take, go back and go in and out, right? But
Sure.
at a baseline, too much downtime, especially because they don't have range options, just sucks a lot from a game playing perspective. It just sucks a lot having to wait because you miss all your opportunities. They get all their stuff back. You can't do anything about it. You just gotta wait. Maybe this next time you'll go in and do something after 8 seconds of waiting and getting healed up. Right? That was
Sure.
the original Overwatch
Hmm.
because there weren't any strong
Lucio and
healers.
Mercy. Well, come on, heal faster, exist harder.
Right?
Go
There
ahead.
was only ever one tank on the screen
Right.
ever.
I agree.
Um, and that's not a point for 5v5. That's just a fact. And so the healers need to be able to make sure that tanks have enough uptime to where tanks are fun and supports can feel impactful.
So
And so it all kind of plays together to be really hard to make individual impact without snowballing.
So to make sure I understand your point, my point was effectively you're saying it has to be a lot of healing input and damage output into the tanks, like they sort of have to be the sponge that receive a lot of things. I made the counterpoint of an early Overwatch. We went and we actually pretty frequently went after the backline first, the supports first,
But
went
that
for
wasn't
that
even a
sort of
fun for
thing.
the supports.
Let me finish
Oh,
because I think
sorry.
I'm going to
Yeah.
tie back to where you were. And you're pointing
Okay.
out it feels really bad if you do that because in order to the supports effectively can't heal each other, can't peel for themselves well in order for that type of game to exist, which by itself may be fine, but the issue you run into is everyone else has to spend a lot of time waiting between fights and there's too much downtime for the tanks and to a lesser degree just in general for the teams between fights if healing is weak, which is maybe why we're in
hmm
this place where they were experimenting with lower in combat healing numbers than out of combat healers. Is that sort of your point why the game works better if we play front to back and that's sort of where you're going with this, or am I misunderstanding?
So I would say dive is the inverse extreme of goats, right? Where goats, it was all about, what you're saying, front to back. In
Sure.
dive, it was as a support player, you live, throw a discord on somebody, and then insta die, right? And so that was really unfun. And
Just
so
kite better, Zed. Sure.
the devs made the mistake of opting for a hard counter in Brig, right?
Yeah.
And that caused its own problem, right? So the problem with Overwatch 1 was always you like the game state right now, and especially whenever Brig was bad, was the
Hmm.
best it's ever been,
Hmm.
right? It's the most even because you don't want front to back or back to front. You want even to where everybody feels like they have a solid amount of impact
Right.
if they are doing well. It
You've
won't
got a
always be
mix, you've got
exactly
alternate win
equivalent,
conditions. Yeah.
but it has to always feel like, from an individual point of view, that you are able to have impact. I think that, there are a lot of ways in Overwatch 1 to lessen those problems, removing stuns, lessening alt charge farm rates, right? You've got healing, AoE healing being too strong. I think all of those would lead to a very much more fun experience.
I mean,
And I'll be
AoE.
honest,
Go. Sorry, it's a tangent. Go ahead.
I couldn't say for certain because it hasn't ever existed
Hmm.
whether or not this version of Overwatch 1 that I'm saying would be more or less fun than the 5v5 version with all of these updates that it is getting, but it is I think it's easier to accomplish in 5v5. Plus, I mean, I really enjoy powerful tanks. You
Sure.
could in 5v5, you could explore the extremes of the extremes by giving Reinhardt fucking everything on the planet, and he still wouldn't be busted because he has to drop his shield.
Sure, but that sort of seems like a design creep issue in and of itself, where Reinhardt in some ways is weak right now because he has to pick between swinging and shielding, whereas almost every newer hero, almost every hero that's been added to the game, tends to be stronger, and they tend to be the strongest heroes until heroes see reworks, with some
Yeah,
exceptions for heroes like Tracer. But okay, okay.
I mean, I wasn't making a specific point in how they should do it. It's more that they can do it now.
Hmm.
Because otherwise, if you buff Reinhardt in smaller ways, he'll just become Omega busted.
Okay. So, things that we have to look forward to for Overwatch 2 is hey, you like where they're exploring in terms of by getting rid of this oppressive tank synergy, we're in a place where they can keep the maximum and minimum contribution of a tank closer to each other. They don't have to design across such a wide spectrum, and it potentially makes games feel less out of other players' control and less like hey, this was decided at lobby, at lobby selection sort
Hmm.
of for who we had here because other people are going to have more impact. And you think tanks rather than supports or something else are the right place to attack for that because A, the tanks have the most energy, and B, you get into a place where there's just too much downtime between fights if you go after supports, specifically in the form of the amount of healing that they do.
Yeah, and
Okay.
the devs don't want too much downtime whenever they they decrease the respawn timer for Overwatch 2 to
Okay.
7.5 seconds now.
Okay. So tell me about that. What are the things you most look forward to in terms of the changes that you've seen there? So like less downtime. Okay, that changes things. Does it make the game less about team fights? I think you and I would both agree probably not at a high level. It's probably still
Probably
just
not
as
at a high
much about
level.
team fights. But you tell me what are some of the things that you most look forward to that you've heard about Overwatch 2 here? What are the positives that maybe the people who have just been seeing negative after negative missed out on? Because I know you really scoured some of those
Oh
developer
yeah.
interviews, some of those announcements. What are the best highlights you saw out of there?
So all of my core things that I'm looking forward to are based around one core concept of individual agency. The more impact you are able to have as an individual, regardless of how your team is performing.
Okay.
I'm going to list them off. Decreased ultimate farm rates. It means that there are less ultimates up. Just period. That's the end of the
But
statement. There are
I
less ultimates,
can I attack that
and
one for a second?
I'm not done yet.
Okay.
So having less ultimates
Mm-hmm.
up in individual fights means that your own individual ultimates do more, and you won't have as many ultimates to go against, which means it'll be easier to plan and counterplay the ultimates that you do have to go against whenever you don't have an ult. So it'll come down to execution of their ult versus your execution of your ult or abilities.
Okay, but like that's highlighting the execution, how good of an ult you get off versus the other guy. Whereas ults was actually one of the things in the game that, hey, me being better than my opponent, this isn't like League where I just get fed a ton because I'm better than my opponent, and maybe I can make up for the rest of my team being bad because of that. But ults are an example of the better you're doing, the faster you're getting your ult relative to the rest
It'll
of the
still be like
lobby.
that. It'll
Okay.
just be less. Because I mean, for me, if I were to say pick soldier,
Mm-hmm.
right? In Overwatch 1 versus Overwatch 2, just in this Ultimates example.
Sure.
And I, in the vast, if you're talking percentages, right, you will be able to have more impact in more fights. Because one, Visor is pretty shit. In Overwatch 2, it'll just be better because one less tank. But even imagine Overwatch 1 Visor was just as shit as Overwatch 2 Visor, right? They're equally
Okay.
shit,
Okay.
right? If they have an ultimate or two, even if they're a tank and or support ultimate, right? There won't be as many tank and support ultimates or DPS ultimates to fight against. So you only have to plan against one or two, which means you only have to counter one or two. If you deal with those properly and play around them, that's a game-winning play. Plus, there's also one less person, which also means there's less ult in general. Plus, well, that one less person is not a is a tank, which means that there will be less setup for ultimate, which means that an ultimate is not just a free win anymore, even if you have a lot of them. I think you're going to see a lot more fights in Overwatch 2 if this happens, which I don't know if it'll happen. But if
Sure.
it happens where there's like 4 ults in a fight, it's no longer as much of a guarantee. It's been less of a guarantee ever since tanking and all of that stuff was reeled in some. But it'll be even less of a guarantee in Overwatch 2 because there will be more room to counter it with your base abilities
Okay.
and
I mean, I
gameplay.
think ults have just gotten less and less dangerous. I don't necessarily know that that was tanking getting reeled in that made ults less dangerous. I think people's positioning has gone significantly better, as well as people recognizing things that can counter ults that are abilities. Um, uh, I guess I'm not totally tied on this idea that it was an extra tank. Okay, that's fine. Give me more in terms of things you're looking forward to here. So you started with the ult charge time change there. What else is interesting to you here?
Stun nerf.
Okay,
Remove
for
all
sure.
stuns from all characters besides tanks, besides I guess the skill shot ones.
Okay. I
Less
can see
stuns.
how that would be massively fun. Doesn't a game need some level of
No.
control though? And not
Your
necessarily.
control is your execution. If you rely on stuns, you're bad.
Oh, if you rely on defense matrix, are you bad?
Defense matrix is a tool, and you cannot get a kill with defense matrix. You
Okay.
can
If you
influence a kill, but it's not. You can play around defense matrix way easier and way more fun than you can play around flashbang. And if you get hit with defense matrix, you don't instantly die.
but
It's
the
it's
point
the it's the counterplay.
Sure, you don't. Okay, but like, I don't have to get stunned to get eliminated by Discord either. And we can say, hey, Discord is, not a
It
skill
just
shot.
makes
It's
it
not,
worse.
and they're working on it, which they've said they are,
Stuns
which
are
is good.
easier than other executions, and they get as much value, if not more, depending on the composition you play. The more stuns you stack together,
Hmm.
the more annoying it is, even if they're worse than you. It takes away the skill factor.
I mean, sort of. Like, is a stun really that different than an immortality cooldown? Like, hey, I
Immortality
had
is stupid
Wraith.
too, and
Okay,
it should
but
be removed.
so here's the issue that you run into. If you tell me, and that's why I went to Defense Matrix first, because this is where I thought we were going. Like, again, we're not purely playing an FPS here that is based around who has the best aim mechanics. We're playing a game that, in order for it to have some level of balance and not just be either the characters with the best one shot aim mechanics or the characters with the most movement wins, there has to be some level of controlling that. And things that we have in this game that control for those that kind of sort of things are mercy res, defense matrix, barriers, immortality cooldown, stuns. Those are all things that are specifically there that are kind of unfun. I agree, like it's not fun when you eliminate someone and they come back to life. It's not fun when you get a hit a clean headshot on Widow, but it turns out she was in her Diva's defense matrix. Like those things aren't fun, but them being there is sort of necessary for this to not be that pure FPS. And if we all wanted to play the pure FPS, those games are already on the market, right?
Removing stuns isn't going to make the game pure FPS. You just add other utility.
Right. But you didn't like immortality cooldowns like Wraith and Ice Block and Lamp, right?
I'm fine with Wraith. So the
Okay, is Wraith a lot different than a stun, really? Like,
I think that Wraith shouldn't be able to get through ultimates. Yes. So the difference is it's punishability and punishment, right? So if you look at defensive abilities, just really easily because
sure.
it's the comparison you're drawing. Um, Defensive abilities like Ice Block and Wraith,
Hmm.
while individual immortality, they don't lead to a kill most of the time. If any of the time, they are used to leave or get away, and they're punishable, especially Ice Block. But even Wraith, you can kill him whenever he comes out of it, and he can't go aggressive anymore. But if
Okay.
you look at stuns, right, it is both a it is both really hard to punish if they have it, Brig, McCree,
Okay.
because if you don't perfectly execute on Genji or Tracer, you will just die, right? Which
Sure.
makes it unfun, and it's less skilled than the amount of the kill you'd have to get anyway. It's also a punishment to where if you aren't way better than them, to make up for the fact that they have an ability that closes the gap in skill, which is really annoying, if you aren't way better than them, then you just die.
But if I'm Tracer fighting Reaper and I'm not way better than the Reaper, or the Reaper doesn't make a stupid mistake, I can't make him die either unless he misuses Wraith. Like, you're sort of like, hey, I can't kill this Brig. Yeah, I can't take out the Brig because she has Bash and her Zen's paying attention to her. I also can't take out the Reaper because he can Wraith back towards his, towards his own core.
Reaper is easier to kill either way, and you can punish the Reaper, right? So if McCree's walking up behind
Mm-hmm.
his tanks and and he's just shooting away, right? And then you come in as a tracer,
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of there's a zone, right? For any against any good Kree, there's a zone to where you cannot occupy without being intensely reactive. But even then, there's just the reaction times is sometimes impossible if they flick right. And so they'll flick to you and you'll die. If you're doing that with a Reaper, right, you can track him. Maybe you won't even force him out, but you won't stand to die, right? So if you properly mechanically blink in, track him, you might force his wraith, and then he can't go anymore, right? If he's going in, even if he's playing in the same spot as the McCree, right? You
Mm-hmm.
aren't guaranteed to die, and he becomes easier to kill afterwards. It's the counterplay.
Well,
The
but
difference is the amount of counterplay.
It's not though, because Bash has counterplay too. You have to get out the Wraith just like you have to get out the Bash before you can really expect to go for the elimination. And once Brig doesn't have her Bash, she goes over
Maybe
like
I
wet
should
toilet
rephrase.
paper
It's
to
the
a
amount of
Tracer as
skill
well.
in the counterplay.
Okay.
It
Um,
it's not a necessarily like the stuns are annoying, but it
I
feels
don't
even
know. Brig
worse
has to
to
hit.
be.
It's an easy skill shot,
I
but
have a
Brig has
point.
to hit a skill shot, whereas Reaper doesn't. Wraith is literally press the button.
Uh, I mean, Bash is not a skill shot.
I said it was a light skill shot. I'm not pretending that it's an intense skill shot, but it's more intense
You're
than
just egging
Wraith.
me on.
I mean, I think this is pretty good faith, honestly.
Mm, okay, well, I'd say the difference is between these bad counterplays and other good counterplays is that the bad ones have disproportionate skill curves. It is way easier to hit a flash or a bash on Brig or McCree than to have aim or brain. It doesn't require much thought or mechanics, which are the two core fundamentals of Overwatch that should be highlighted to hit those abilities, and you still aren't punished for hitting them. Even if like the only time you get punished is Brig is whenever you're actually throwing, but Brig is so tanky anyway that even if you walk in, I've done this. You
Hmm.
walk in, bash, walk out, and you're fine. If you time it right, of course. It's asterisk, but it's way easier to live or not get punished as those than to do it as any other character. It's the amount of punishability. It's just too easy for how hard it is to punish for more skill. It's not. It doesn't respect competitive integrity.
Um. Okay. I mean, I hear where you're going. I don't think there's much further to go here because I think we fundamentally see those a little bit differently. I don't know that we're really going to get too much deeper there because, again, I look at that and, we can talk about different levels of skill shot for Flash versus Bash. We can talk about, hey, what's really the difference between having a defensive cooldown that I literally don't have to aim at all in the form of Wraith form versus something like Flashbang where, that becomes more of a skill shot, especially when I'm thinking about like a Genji matchup when he still has Deflect up, things like that. So like, again, I'm not totally sure that we're going to be on the same page here, but that's okay. That you've explored the point that I think you wanted to here, which was, hey, you feel like there's greater levels of autonomy that people have because there's less stuns. And I agree, there is greater ability for individuals to take over games when there are less stuns there, but there would also be less greater ability for individuals to take over games if we removed defense matrix, invulnerability cooldowns, res, all those sorts of things too, but I don't think it would be healthy to get rid of all of those, I guess is
No,
where I
no.
would come back here.
Well, I mean, res is probably going to get removed. It's more about,
Sure.
what is anti-competitive, what removes agency,
Hmm.
and self-defense cooldowns don't remove agency, but stuns and reses do.
Okay, so stuns and reses remove agency, but like so does getting headshot by Widow, right? Like if I
Yeah,
get
and it's
mashed.
annoying.
Okay,
People
so
dislike being one shot,
okay,
and
so
so they're looking at that too.
okay. Um, I'm just trying. I guess I'm just imagining for a moment a game where like we remove the one shots and we also
No,
remove
you don't
the
remove them. You just change
stuns.
how they function, so
Okay.
there's more counterplay. Widowmaker in Overwatch 1 is broken because she can headshot 4 people within 4 seconds. You
So
change how she functions in Overwatch 2 to where she can still one shot, but you know how it's gonna happen easier. It's easier to predict, which means you can counterplay it. The counterplay is a very important thing there.
okay.
It makes it more fun.
This one's getting a lot of traction from chat here, and I'm totally fine ignoring them if you want. But do you mind if I grab a question from EMF
No,
for
I
you?
don't mind.
Okay.
Bring in chat.
So what I'm looking at here is if I look at EMF, he says, let me just go here. I feel like Max is only thinking about the counterplay in terms of his one DPS side, like whichever DPS he's thinking about playing. Counterplay is the way two characters and two people playing them, in my opinion. For example, he's like, oh, Reaper wraiths away and I can kill him. Doesn't have that in terms of Reaper tracers blinking that. I think his argument is just DPS players will be in more control and have more fun, whereas stuns are helpful for tanks and supports. So do you want to respond to that? Because
Yeah,
that's,
yeah.
okay, go ahead.
So, um, I typically think of the game from every perspective because I also really enjoy tanks and supports.
Sure.
Like, I love how tanks feel. Probably like even in Overwatch 1 right now, even though I'm supposed to be a DPS player, I enjoy tanks more than I enjoy DPS right
I
now.
was
In
going to
comp,
say, when you were
great
pretending you
player.
had no tank chops, I was sort of rolling my eye here, but go ahead. Yeah.
Bro, I was just I was in I mean I was playing Roadhog in Sigma and I was just farming. I love Reinhardt whenever I'm able to play him.
Hmm.
I enjoy every single tank, and supports are a little bit more hard to enjoy because of some of the more annoying aspects. But as a tank player, right, especially at higher ranks, whenever
Hmm.
brig players are really good, but even just in general, I find it more annoying to face up against the stuns because stuns. It's like think of your job as Reinhardt or Roadhog. The only characters that don't have to worry about stuns are like Sigma and Orisa, and people don't even like fighting those characters. They're problems in their own right. Um, I think it's more annoying. Like I try to play tank, and then I try to do anything, and I've got a brig flail me away. There's a classic Aspen clip where a monkey
Sure.
was trying to jump up on Gibraltar, and he kept getting booped down by a 4-second flail,
Yep.
and it's so annoying as a tank. So, or like, there's a brig Zen sitting there. And I'm on the most individual agency character Roadhog because my rest of the team I don't know what they're doing, right? So I'm just gonna go Roadhog. That's how everybody does it as
Okay.
tank. I go Roadhog, and then there's Brig Zen, and they've got like Sigma, and then another Roadhog. So maybe I outskill their Roadhog, or maybe I don't, right? And their Roadhog is just sitting next to their Brig Zen, and they also have a McCree. And so I need to balance not getting shit stomped by a whole bunch of stuns because I don't know, maybe the Brig and Kree and Zen and Roadhog are right around the next corner. So I need to kind of wade my way around. And then I get around, I hook the Sigma, and the Kree was right over here, and then he stuns me out of my hook, and then I die because then I get rocked too, and I have no power. On DPS, maybe I'd be able to go Hanzo and get a one shot, right? On as DPS, I might actually have more power against stuns because tanks are taking the stuns more of the time.
Hmm.
And so I think it's even more important for tanks to remove stuns so that they feel like they can do things. And then one shots is more of a support thing because I'll be honest, except for in terms of game impact,
Hmm.
because tanking and supporting are strong. Like excluding game impact, DPS deal with the least amount of annoyance in terms of abilities. tanks just have to deal with stuns the most, and I hate
Well,
it the most of the time.
tanks eat the stuns because they're the ones who break the corners who sort of open the fights. But I
They're the only
also
ones who can really,
right.
but it's still really,
But I
really
think
annoying.
like they're not going to take away Lucio's boop, for example. They might take away Briggs' whip shot, we'll see, but like they're not going to take away Lucio's boop, and that's sort of the thing. Do you want supports to just be DPS that throw out harmony orbs? Like, do we want them all to be like Zen? Because in order to have supports be different from DPS, we sort of have to give them stuff like whip shot, like boop, maybe like Sombra hack, stuff like that, in order for them to have or mercy damage boost, in which case, okay, congrats, you didn't get whip shot when you tried to jump up as Winston, you just got shot in the face by a mercy boosted Ashley. You see where I'm going here? We're like, I'm not sure that's really better, and I think supports have to occupy that space of supports and tanks unless we just make them fat DPS or DPS that also provide a little bit of healing. We have a pretty limited design space, right?
Um, can you go over your point again?
Sure. So you're saying, hey, like you would much rather have to. What I'm saying here is, you said that we're sort of going back from the EMF comment, but you said that you view this as it's really hard to get in as a tank because there's so much CC that messes with you. And I guess I'm saying, but if the supports have less CC to play with because they're not messing tanks up with CC, they're probably just messing them up with damage instead. Like, people like Lucio, yes, are going to keep their boop, but overall, in order to keep a character's power at a certain level where you potentially want it, your support is, they can have some amount of healing, but they're also going to have some ability to protect themselves. And especially if we don't want healing to be too strong in combat, which it looks like we don't, we're going to have a bunch of supports like Zen, I would think, where they just do a lot of damage. And is that, I mean, maybe that's better, but like those aren't really supports anymore. Those are just 4 damage heroes running around, right?
So it's a little bit complicated. This little bit, it kind of goes back into our other points
Mm-hmm.
of the global game change.
Mm-hmm.
But what I think happens whenever you remove most of the stuns and then remove another half of the stuns at that point because you're removing a tank
Sure.
is that you don't even need to have as many stuns and supports, right? It's more of a so the biggest question that we'll have to see is the duelist problem. Duelists could be just way too strong in Overwatch 2. I think supports are the most fundamentally hard to design properly. Maybe that's why there's so few fun supports. At least from my perspective, whenever I play support, it's the least fun role compared to the other roles.
Interesting.
Um,
Okay.
even if like even if I'm playing on a good team, it still feels like I have less impact. Now that might just be me as a player, um, but I do enjoy like healing. I enjoy the healing numbers. I just like to have impact outside of healing. And your point was removing stuns from supports, like Brigitte specifically, could lessen their impact. And then there's boops, which is another problem. I think ways to
Well,
get
if
around
okay,
stuns.
sure.
Yeah, you can. Even if I was wrong, there wasn't the main point.
Yeah, no, that's
Um,
fine. Continue.
I think the main way that you get around that isn't by trying to like you obviously don't want to have stuns if you can have less stuns because
Sure.
stuns are annoying for the person who is being stunned. That's just how it works.
Sure.
And you don't want an annoying game experience. So what you do instead is you add utility that can allow you to counterplay the enemy, right? A very easy example is anti-nade is a very good deterrent for tanks if
Mm-hmm.
they're trying to walk on you. It is also a self-heal. So if you're being rushed by a Genji or a Tracer, you can do damage, deny their healing, and heal yourself all at the same time, which is a pretty good example of utility done right. Even though it can feel really oppressive sometimes, I think it's balanced in such a way with a long cooldown that it's fair. You can look at other examples in other categories like DPS, self-survivable ability. I think supports go have tended to go very strongly into the high health or high stun, where like Baptiste literally can make himself and his teammates unkillable, and
Sure.
he has AoE healing. Brig is a tank that heals herself and her team all at the same time. Moira has high healing, both in terms of her orb and her self heal, and high mobility. And then Zen's on the opposite extreme where he just does raw damage. Mercy has mobility, which I think is the least annoying version of the defensive. Like, unless you have a one shot, like Roadhog doesn't care if Moira fades because he'll just walk at her and hook her, right?
Right.
Um, but he definitely cares about Brig and Zen. Um, I think, I mean, they just got to be more creative. The devs have to be more
Well, I
creative,
mean,
flex
they
their brain muscles a
can,
little bit,
but
and come
they've
up with
given
ideas that aren't stuns and healing.
but they've all sort of been stuns. I mean, Anna has a sleep dart. That's her
Yeah.
stun to protect herself with. Lucio has a boop, which he gets to keep, but he has a boop and high mobility. Brig has a boop and a stun. Then we can get into Moira, who, Moira and Mercy, yes, we're going to use pure mobility as our safety aspect, and that's okay, but that's like a tiny portion of the support cast at this point. And then Zen is the very extreme, well, damage. Well, I can one shot you. I have charged right clicks and I
So
have
I
discord.
think the two opposites on the extremes
Mm-hmm.
are, in terms of at least how it is perceived on average and in general. Lucio, excluding tryhard free for alls, is
Mm-hmm.
generally not an annoying character. It can be annoying if you're a support getting rushed down by a Lucio,
Sure.
but if you're getting rushed down by a Lucio and you don't win that duel, it's probably because you deserve to lose that duel, right?
Sure.
You just pay attention, you win the duel, you're getting outskilled because Lucio requires a lot of mechanics to use the movement properly. If you get booped off, it's probably your fault. If you get 1v1 via
Sure.
Lucio, he's just better than you.
Most of us don't have a
Vegeta,
problem with Lucio. We're good. Yep, he's
yeah.
beating you, and if it's like a case of he outmuscled you,
I mean,
remember he
sometimes
was.
sometimes Lucios just kick your ass, and that's how it is.
And that's
And then
fine.
just
They're
like,
good. They're
this guy's
balancing their
insane.
movement and their aim. Yep.
Brigitte on the opposite side is like, okay, this person is a walking fortress, especially whenever she is paired with other characters like Baptiste, which makes her more of a fortress,
I
or
think we mean
Zen
only.
is a walking
I think
tank.
we really mean only when she's paired with other characters.
I
Brigitte
think she's still
melts if her
annoying,
Anna or
but
Zen
she's
doesn't pay attention to
especially
her.
annoying whenever she's paired with other characters. So, um, Brigitte has just passively, right, a
Mm-hmm.
flail. Her most skilled mechanics is her flail. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes hitting her flail is really impressive, right? I've seen good flails.
Sure.
And I think it's fine that that's a skill shot. I think the problem is that she also has high HP, armor, tanking, self heal, and a stun to where it doesn't feel like the only way you can do anything is to overwhelm her or distance her, but then she has a shield and she can walk away. This is specifically relevant at high levels. At lower levels, it's not as annoying because Brigittas are way worse, and as are the players that play
I would
around the
actually
Brigittas.
argue that the reason she's less important at lower levels is because her partner support doesn't pay any attention to her. I think you're really overestimating how bulky she is when her other support doesn't pay any attention to her.
It depends, because I mean, I agree. Depending, because I'm talking on an individual basis. If me as Tracer were to try and kill a Brigitte
Mm-hmm.
one on one, and this is with normal map geometry, I'm trying to push into her, or even she's walking into open space, it'll take a large amount of time for me to kill her. If
Right, but
I'm
she can't
on,
win. Like you
um,
have to force it. You have to force the fight
she can win.
only if you force things too early. Only if you go, there's a timer clock on me. I need to get her eliminated and get onto this, or I'm gonna take a risk and try to stick her, and in this, and as I'm trying to do so, get stuck. Like she legit cannot win the fight against you unless you try to force it.
Well, I mean, yes, but you have to, like, she just sits in the back and lives forever. And heals her. She has a 20-meter inspire radius and ranged healing, and can flail you from far away. You have to force a fight the vast majority of the time. Um, like,
Right.
this is
Okay.
still a 6v6 scenario,
Sure.
but she doesn't have her support with her. It still takes a while. even if she's just sitting back. And if she has a Zen or Baptiste with her, there's no point in even trying unless you have a heavy distraction, you know they're down in more, or you're really good. And you just go for the Baptiste at that point, probably, or a pulse, right? It's it's a matter of I don't feel like I'm being outskilled by this character. I could go Winston
Hmm.
and try to kill a Brigitte, and it would take fucking ages. Not because she's good. I could be fighting a really bad Brigitte, but if she hits a single hit on me, it'll
Hmm.
take a while. Especially if they're good at using flail, it'll take a very long time to where you might even actually lose if you do it if the brig does it right in a true 1v1 scenario. And I think losing that individual agency, that's like it feels like you're not even being outskilled. You're losing because they're a better character in that situation. And because Big is so generalist, especially at higher levels, it ends up being a lot of situations. If you look at a lower level example, it might be Kree, Flash, Fan Hammer, or like Reaper in general is pretty strong. Roadhog can feel like that sometimes.
Hmm.
It's the level of skill required to the result and how it can feel really unfun if you're dying for something that doesn't, you can't do anything.
Okay. I mean, I think we're probably viewing this a little differently. Like you're like, no, there's always a timer pressure on you. I'm the DPS or I'm the player in the game. I have to make something happen. Like it's your job when you're driving the Winston or the Tracer to make something happen. You need to solve the fight before your teammates manage to throw it. Like I get that, but like it, you can break your shield as Tracer reasonably quickly. It's not, oh, it's gone in one clip, but you can do it. And as Winston, you can path in such ways that you just free drop on her and she can't really whip shot you away very effectively. And then you do just win. Like, Briggs don't beat Winstons without help. That's not a thing that's happened since her
I
rework.
don't think that's true.
Okay. I mean, I think we're in our agree to disagree territory here, and that's fine. That's totally fine. We can be in our agree to disagree territory, but
Okay.
okay, let's move back. So we're in
We
an
don't want to keep
agency
talking about
standpoint.
Brig for too long. It
We
happens
could,
too
we
much.
could, but she's a controversial hero. I get
She's
it.
a problematic character.
I hear you. I hear you. So let's go ahead and go. More individual agency is what you're looking forward to. And can you give us more examples of individual agency? We've heard the ult change. We've heard less stuns.
Um,
What else are we getting? Either in terms
one
of
less
individual.
tank.
One less tank does mean more individual agency just because there's less players in there. There's
Less
also less of that
players and less
synergy to
tanking.
abuse.
Hmm.
Okay,
Yeah, we went on that for a while.
we did.
Uh, Let me think. I mean, the removing one tank kind of scale. Oh yeah, the roll passives. How do I forget
Oh
about
yeah,
that?
those are an
It's
interesting one.
it's so easily forgettable.
And yet, I
Roll
think they could make
passives.
a pretty meaningful difference. So
I
let's get
think
into them.
they are so very important
Okay.
and so cool for adding individual agency in unique ways that does not feel oppressive, right? For
Okay.
tanks, it's literally about making everything feel less oppressive
Yep.
to where you can just be the marauder of force that you really want to be, where you just wreak havoc. You are never punished if you do it well, and they can't do shit if you're good, right? Of course, the level of skill will rise based on the level of opponent. You can't do everything
I was
unless
going to
you're
say, if
really
the tanks
good.
are taking over the game again and your tank is bad, it sounds like we've lost agency as
Well,
DPS
no,
and support
it's
players.
like
But okay.
in Overwatch 2, if the tank is taking over the game, it's because he's better than your entire team and you deserve to lose.
Okay.
Like he's better than you and your entire team. Lose now because he's destroying you.
Okay.
That's Overwatch 2 tank gameplay. It'll happen less, but it'll kind of shine a light on cool tank gameplay. Anyway, um, so it makes things less oppressive. You're allowed to be what you want to be as a tank. What I want to be, at least. Some people like to play more passive. I think there will still be characters that allow you to play more like that, but at the baseline, you will be more of a marauder. For DPS, it'll be more about leveraging your additive value, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can be more creative. If there's a really strong tank that is just undeniably strong on the front line or holding space, you're able to get around them faster. As a sniper, you're able to get away from the buffed up tanks easier. And then I think the most impactful one for gameplay and side is the support one. Even more like besides maybe the alt change for tanks,
Okay.
I think this one is the most important for an individual because you don't have to rely on your other healer to heal. You don't have to go grab a mini and you don't have to waste your self heal ability,
Sure. Big
which
deal.
means
Yep.
one, they can lessen the amount of self heal abilities that are generally AoE,
Okay.
and they can balance that a little bit more. But crucially, it just feels better as a support to have more uptime because that's kind of the character. The characters are all I want to be healing, I want to be doing things, my uptime is my value. The better you are at maintaining your uptime, the better a support you are. And then you got impact cooldowns and everything that are especially valuable if you have high uptime to where you can capitalize on that. So the healing self heal passive, even if it's slow, means that you won't have to leave for poke damage. You know, maybe you win a 1v1, you don't have to go and grab a mini or beg your support to heal you or something. Maybe your soldier comes back and heals you.
Okay.
You can just stay in the fight from safety. Once you heal up, you go back in and you're in the fight. It feels so much better and
I agree.
it'll just be great.
It's gonna be a good feeling not to be like, what, my Lucio's on the other side of the map, and I guess I'm gonna have to nade myself type thing.
Hmm.
Like, I agree, that's a good feeling, and it also gets rid of a little bit of the like, soldier, what are you doing? I want to slap you for dropping this healing station right here rather than being on an. But minor detail, minor detail.
Yeah.
Um, Okay, so I agree that's going to feel better. It's going to give you a little more agency. How do you think the interplay is with supports having, a little more self-healing versus DPS having a bit more movement speed there? Do you think that makes supports more DPS prey or less DPS prey? What do you think on
I
total that
think
looks like?
I think in the total it's better for supports in the total gameplay aspect because you don't know what the damage will be coming from. But obviously the support change doesn't mean anything whenever you're in the fray. It's more about the downtime. So they're going to have to figure out how to balance duelists. I think Reaper is going to be a massive problem for everybody because he's
Okay,
too good versus tanks. He's a really good DPS dueler, and he just destroys supports if he's not checked by good mechanical supports like Ana or Zen. Even then, if you sleep a Reaper and he hasn't used Wraith, he's going to live if there's not somebody else to help you, right?
right.
And then you've got Tracer would probably be too strong. Genji, his name that we haven't heard be strong besides like especially besides that one patch for a month where he was broken.
And I'm ready for that trend to continue, unfortunately. But tell me why that's going to
I
change.
love here's the thing. I love Genji. I
Hey,
love
I love him
Tracer.
too, but
I
he's been
love Reaper.
replaced. Go ahead.
But they are too like I look at Tracer, you look at her abilities. She seems like a specialist, but she plays like a generalist.
I'm sorry,
To
who's
where
the
she is
specialist that plays like a generalist?
Tracer.
Tracer. Okay, yes, yes. She's very much a
Reaper's
generalist, yeah.
Reaper's more in the same, and then Genji aside from the most annoying tanks that are always complained about, Genji is the most generalist character in the game.
He was a better generalist than soldier. I remember when people realized that early in there. But the problem is he's both of the places that he overlaps have been covered, right? Like Echo is
He's
a better poke dive hybrid than him, and Sombra is a better secondary diver than him.
well,
But go ahead.
that's true in the case where being a duelist is bad,
Okay.
and it is in Overwatch One because tanks, specifically stuns, destroy him, and then unskilled AOE healing checks him, and then two tanks. Genji is not good at dealing with two tanks, right? That's his character.
Sure.
That's that he's bad at dealing with macro, but he thrives in the micro.
Okay.
He will be too strong in Overwatch 2 because they're taking away everything that checks him. So they need to remove his balances, right? So the easiest one, right, would
Hmm.
be to nerf his deflect. Um, Probably at least in duration, make it like 1 second.
So
or
you
zero
think
point 0.8
out the
seconds or something.
gate we need to nerf Genji, a hero who's
He
been garbage for 3 years, with the three
Reaper,
week exception?
Tracer, Genji. I mean, the Sombra version's already been nerfed. What other duelist characters are there? That's the core ones that will be omega busted in Overwatch 2.
I mean, maybe, but like we saw in some of the Overwatch 2 gameplay that we saw, we don't know how things will evolve. Maybe you have a firmer grasp than I did, but like Shock was able to do a brawl spawn camp on Rialto. And you can say, I don't remember, I think they were against the
They were
Gladiators.
playing Overwatch 2 like they were playing Overwatch 1.
They
They
absolutely
tried to do a
won.
TP strat
Yeah.
in Overwatch 2 with one
Well,
less tank. They're not gonna live. They did fuck up the TP. I saw that.
right,
But
but like they did a spawn hold and they held it and first didn't get capped on them and they played it, they played Reinhardt Brawl and went we can do this and they did. Now that might not
yeah,
work, but like if that does work or if that's at all workable, does that be like, hey, maybe Genji and Tracer aren't problems? Or like I guess I would need some selling of this. Genji has to be watched like a hawk. Like I see where you're coming from of, hey, because your tanks aren't going to reinforce as quickly, because there's more potential for dueling to happen, because people are going to have to spread more to cover the same amount of map space, that yeah, I can see how duelists get stronger, I suppose. But like we're in a very duel heavy meta right now. We're in a Zen Ball meta that is very duel
double
heavy.
shield too.
Yes, with two tanks, but Genji isn't exactly showing up a lot.
Um, well, that's because Break exists still, and
Okay.
also Genji struggles whenever there's two tanks
Okay.
in general. I mean, I'm just ignoring Overwatch 1 at this point because
But
Overwatch 1 precedent for Genji, it doesn't apply in the same way.
But like if Genji could fight his way past balls and drive them out constantly and fight his way past tracers and sombras, he'd still see use because of how important lane control is in this current meta. Like, yes, it would suck for him of, hey, I still can't get past this brig, but like even just winning lanes is so powerful that if he could play with the front lines, I think he'd be okay. Right? Now he'd have to worry about Sigmas and Divas throwing rocks at him and such, but like I I guess I'd need a little more selling here.
Well, just because he's bad versus other really, really strong duelist characters does not mean that he's bad against non-duelist characters.
Okay.
Um, you look at and we were talking about specifically DPS versus supports
Sure.
in this example.
Sure.
Genji eats supports that are not tanky. It's really not even that difficult if you got the mechanics and you know the combos to just annihilate a support. I was in quick play. I raised my sense a little bit because I was experimenting.
Okay.
And in Overwatch 1, I just walked past the tanks on a flank, got into the back line, and killed two people immediately.
Sure.
It was easy.
Sure.
And part of that is deflect, right? And Tracer is another problem with that. Just because, I mean, I
But
wouldn't say it's a point against Genji to lose to Tracer because Tracer's the strongest DPS in the game.
right.
Um,
I, I guess
and then
my thing
Sombra,
there would sort of be like, yeah, you could do the second elimination might not come quite as quickly if you were playing Tracer, but like when you tell me someone that's spent some time in Contenders Trials, some time in Contenders, is in a top collegiate team, can walk into the backline on a DPS and get to eliminations in quick
it
play,
was
I'm
in
kind
quick
of going to
play.
be like, okay, yeah, and like
I
you
was
said,
I was saying I was saying it was the execution.
okay,
So I'm not entirely sure what's getting lost in translation. Um, in Overwatch 2, Genji is one of the characters alongside Tracer
mm-hmm,
and I don't know about Sombra, but it'll just be too strong, right? Genji struggles versus characters that he cannot use dash on. You can't safely use dash on a Tracer or a Sombra because if you don't get the kill, you're probably dead.
okay,
But he can very easily use dash on immobile characters, generally your backline. And if he can use dash on a character safely, it is a way easier duel, which
okay,
means that specifically for supports, Genji is a problem. Reaper can duel fucking everybody in the game, and especially whenever he has the speed boost and there's one less tanks, he will be an Omega problem. Unless you've got a team that can really support it, right? Now, Overwatch League level,
Okay.
people know how to abuse these characters as individuals and as teams. It kind of creates a buffer, right? But if you're
Sure.
talking in your individual games, these characters will be too strong. And then Tracer as well, it's just the game and the way that they're designing it with less stuns, less AoE healing, less total healing, less tanking, less ultimates is a Tracer game. Especially if she's not nerfed from the point that she is in, the
Okay.
game is Tracers.
So you
Widowmaker, fuck that character, Tracers
okay,
game.
can we ease up on the F bombs? YouTube actually likes them a fair bit less than Twitch. Sorry.
Sorry.
All good. All good. I didn't warn you beforehand. You're fine. Okay.
Sorry, guys.
Okay, no problem. So what you're going for here, and I do agree. I do agree with you on a macro standpoint of dive heroes, duelists are going to be good if we remove stuns from the backline, from the supports, that sort of thing. There's less tank on the board, but I think that's in general. There's less control, right? If you take a tank off the board and you say supports, you're going to have less in terms of stun tools or boop tools or whatever the case is. I agree. By definition, the mobile heroes are going to do well. We're sort of circling back to what I was saying earlier of like, we need some of these things to slow down the game in here in the form of stun and vulnerability cooldowns, resurrect, tack, whatever the case may be. We need some level of them in the game.
Mm.
And again, sort of where I was going with, unless you're going to have every support just be Zenyatta, which is what some people are going for and saying, hey, every Owl team needs to run double flex support, you sort of get to a place of, hey, I'm with you here. Like I am with you that I think I see duelists being powerful and map control and the ability to spread out and take map control and act independently being pretty powerful. And I guess that's okay and it's more individual agency, but it's either going to be more individual agency just for DPS or it's going to be more individual agency with every character playing as if they're like we say more individual agency, but is it just more individual agency for Tracer, Doomfist, Genji, maybe Echo, and then Zen Anna type thing? Like what happens to the rest of the cast?
Yeah, I think the specific things that are being targeted favor some characters more than others. I think
Mm-hmm.
um, Echo actually gets less than other characters because she's not as great of a duelist. She's more of a buster.
Sure.
Um, so she can get really abused by hit scans and strong hit scan and strong mobility duelists
Okay.
like Tracer and Sombra.
Sure.
She gets kind of fucked, but that doesn't mean that she's worse against tanks and supports, right?
Okay.
It's just that some characters get more than others, which is to be expected whenever you make changes like this. I think they need to nerf mobility. They need to nerf the duelists, bring in their utility, and then add more utility, but to make up for the other stats that they're removing in supports and tanks, specifically supports, to make up the difference. Like mobility needs nerfed. Um, you could probably keep even the damage stays the same if you nerf, mobility. Genji's harder because his kit is so generalist. It's a little bit weirder. Tracer, you could just nerf her blink cooldowns and then her damage a little bit to where she can, or even keep the one clips, right? One clips are a skill mechanic, just make her uptime less, and then she's much more balanced. It's that kind of thing where it takes a little bit of tuning. I don't think you need stuns when you could just nerf mobility because there's less tanks to get around, which means you don't need the mobility to be really strong anymore.
Are we playing a hero shooter if we go, let's nerf mobility, let's nerf stuns, and
Yeah.
now I am egging you on a little bit, so I apologize preemptively for this. Are we still playing a hero shooter if we're nerfing the things that make Tracer Tracer and Genji Genji, we're nerfing stuns, we're taking away these synergies that make the tanks feel really awesome and cool by only putting one of the you see where it's like Overwatch was sort of balanced with a philosophy of it's all okay because everyone is overpowered. Like, like everyone feels powerful. Are we still going to have that for Overwatch 2? Do you have an identity crisis there?
I've got an extra question for you.
Shoot.
Um, what other character can do what Tracer does?
Sombra's the
Specifically in the way
closest.
she does it.
Oh, okay. What other character can do what Tracer does? So if
In the way
we're
she plays.
the way she plays. I mean, no one can really do exactly what Tracer does, but before Sigma existed, I'd have said the same thing about Diva, right?
but they do it. I mean, Diva and I agree with this Diva and Sigma thing.
Hmm.
That's different, and we know they're hardworking those characters. So I'm just gonna exit them out of that conversation. They don't exist right now.
Oh,
My
okay.
point is invalid. Um, you look at every character, their identity is still strong. It's more about their identity within the context of Overwatch,
Oh,
right?
I see where you're going. Okay.
So Overwatch characters,
Hmm.
some feel more powerful than others. Some characters' identities get more out of these changes than others. But if you bring them down, bring the characters that get more down to the rest of Overwatch, and
Got
then
it.
you give the characters that lose more to get up to the middle, they'll still be just as unique as when you began before all the changes in the first place.
Okay, that's fair. So you say it still works even if we take all this stuff, even though they won't feel as powerful necessarily, they'll still feel and it still sort of works because heroes still very much feel very individual in Overwatch, where Sombra doesn't feel like Tracer, Lucio doesn't feel like Tracer, Orisa doesn't feel like Reinhardt, that sort of thing. Is that,
I'd
and you
say
think,
they feel just as powerful in terms of impact. They're just less powerful statistically.
okay, okay.
It's not more powerful in terms of impact.
Okay, so delays. Let's zoom out for a moment and talk about delays, talk about how much work
Bobby
has been
Kotick.
done. What's that?
Bobby.
Ah,
Bobby.
okay, okay. So
Bobby.
I think some of the like doom
My
and
boy.
gloom surrounding Overwatch 2 is this game ever even gonna come out? Of like, hey, this game got
Eventually.
announced way too early. It isn't ready. They showed us the PvP rework, but they had so many characters that they weren't willing to let the pros play. And then we have the situation where they're like, oh yeah, PvE, but they haven't shown us that much of PvE. And when they showed us skill trees, it's like that's a template where you're reusing the same ability icon 6 times in the same skill tree. You guys don't have anything done with this, and then we get announcements of delays. And I will admit that it looks like maybe they're further ahead than we would have previously thought a month ago when we saw that contenders announcement, and it looks like the build is stable enough that they think they'll be able to use it for contenders, not just Owl. We're inferring a
Ooh.
little bit there, but we've seen a lot in the delay world, and like, did Overwatch 1 have to die so that Overwatch 2 could live? And are we even going to be getting something worth it? Like, they're going to give us probably as many heroes as we'd have gotten if they just stuck to the schedule, right? And I know I set up a huge ball there to deal with, so pick that apart one at a time or however you like.
Okay. Yarn ball, first thread. I'm pulling now.
Perfect.
I think obviously COVID. I don't even have to elaborate on that
Sure.
point. Obviously
Sure.
COVID. Internal problem within Blizzard. I do not think that Jeff Kaplan would have left, um, or at least it would have been a smoother transition if there weren't deep systemic issues within Blizzard.
Okay.
I think Chaco leaving due to environmental, because there was a producer that went on Twitter talking about environmental issues within Blizzard and
Hmm.
how the Overwatch team is, I think the word is being used correctly, juxtaposed to the rest of Blizzard, to where the Overwatch team has a very specific environment that is very accepting, very, I mean, much more the ideal development space. And then you've got the upper executives who are like Jeff Kaplan, who retired or quit whenever he was the vice president.
Sure.
And then Chaco, the previous game director, who was the vice president, who
Okay.
see that regularly and are like, okay, the development team will be fine without me. This isn't good for my mental health. I'm going to leave. And that creates delays because it is always an adjustment time whenever you're changing leadership,
For sure.
because the leadership will want to
Change a lot.
maybe re-explore old ideas.
Yep.
They'll want to do other things. They'll have to get used to their job, get used to the workflow and structure. So having two big names leave, besides all the other ones that I'm sure did happen after the lawsuit and then Bobby Kotick's thing, it creates delays. Now, obviously, I don't know everything about it,
Okay.
but I think that's a big aspect. And then another thing that I think, going based off of Metro's leak, which seems more credible now in hindsight, and
Sure.
what the state of development looked like, and based on past developer speaking, right? You can ask me to elaborate on any of those after this.
Okay.
But I think that they put most of their development time. One, they had to provide the foundation. A good game does not function or does not exist without the proper software. And this includes the cinematics and everything, being able to properly transition. They made Choreo, which is an in-game animation thing that they talked about in BlizzCon Online. The example that they use is the Widowmaker running around and then the Zenyatta jumping back or whatever.
Sure.
Um, they made a cloth and physics engine for clothing to make it look way better. They also have a more detailed animation engine for facial features.
Okay.
I feel, and because software is software, all game development is really hard on the software side. Basically, I don't know if this is exaggerated, but some famous developer said that um, 95% of your game development is fixing bugs. The other 5% is actually making the game. Because coding is so complex and difficult, it takes a lot more time, especially whenever you're looking at Blizzard's, quality standard.
Sure.
So that combined with the fact that they're creating new software and they had to change everything causes delays. And then I
Okay.
also think that their ambitions with hero missions and talents are so astronomically large. Combine that with the deep story, with all the voice actors and the music and everything, all of the stuff that goes into that, and the new maps, new characters. That's a lot of game development time, right? Whenever you think about it, they so hmm, I'm gonna write this down, and I'm gonna let you go on to anything if you want to focus on anything.
Okay. Oh, are you muting as you're writing this? I'm not totally
No,
sure I followed that. Okay, got it. Looked like your mouth was moving there, but I wasn't hearing you. That's fine. Okay.
I'm done. I
You
I just have it as a footnote for the future.
okay, got it. Okay.
So do you wanna?
Yeah, no, I want to move us from there. Perfect, perfect. So, what I would go into from here then is like, okay, so you think the delays happened because we had large, high profile people move out, and things are always going to slow down when high profile things people move out. And I agree with that aspect. But I don't like what we still care about is the finished product and why should we now be looking forward to the finished product? Because we've seen games that have had 8-year development cycles, and we're not there on this one yet, but we've seen that where you build your software to actually develop your game. You build your tools, your engines to handle your clothing, your hair, things like that. But then if you mix things up too long and wait too long, those sort of become old by the time you release it. If you change leadership too many times, you get into situations where, hey, if you guys had just created your game, it would have been fine, but you kept adding stuff and scope creeping. And I know they've locked it down now, but should we be worried about that? Should we be worried that they've tried to make something too big and like this has been a long development cycle? Or, should we be upset that maybe it hasn't been a long development cycle because they weren't working for the first year when they announced it? Like, I guess I'm still looking for the like, what's the upside here of, hey, this is actually really good news and they're close to ready, and what we have seen tells us that it's ready and it's going to be great, and we don't need to worry about the delays, or maybe we don't need to worry about the rot maybe outside of the Overwatch development team that's not going to poison its way in, because I think a lot of us would have looked at Jeff as, maybe rightly or wrongly, the shield that had enough power in the company to protect his team, and that shield is gone now, right?
Well, there's a lot of points to touch on there.
Sure.
What was the first one? Uh, I don't remember what the first one is,
Oh, okay.
but
No problem. So,
that.
what I'm looking at here in terms of the first point there is okay, so like what is the look forward aspect? My concern is it's been a long development cycle, and usually it's
Ah,
a bad sign when you have a particularly long
so
development cycle.
um, you remember Titan?
Yeah.
You remember its development time before it was canceled?
I do not remember Titan's development cycle, but you got a good. I see where you're going. I like it.
7 years.
Okay.
Um, then and just remember, let me look it up, just to make sure. Um, Game director Titan Blizzard. Jeff Kaplan.
Yeah. Funny how that works. Okay.
So Jeff Kaplan was actually the game director for the game that got canceled after 7 years.
Yeah.
Um, and then he turned around, made Overwatch in like 3.5 years. Maybe it was like published in 4.5 years or something. Pretty good turnaround. He made a great game. Titan was a very ambitious, big MMO PvE project that was supposed to replace Titan. Very interestingly.
Okay.
A few similarities there: scope, scale, ambition. Um, Jeff Kaplan. No, I love Jeff Kaplan. I think he was a very important shield, as you said.
Okay.
I think that the game development team at Overwatch is strong enough in their own right. They have enough game pride and they have enough strong personalities to where they can act as their own shield now. I feel like that's the only reason Jeff felt comfortable enough to leave in the first place, was he felt that they would be fine on their own. I don't think Jeff is the type to just dish them whenever they like unprepared. I'm sure they were talking about um, Aaron Keller. Keep thinking Aaron Kaplan. That's not right. Aaron Keller.
Little
They
Jeff,
were
Aaron
probably
Kaplan. Go
transitioning.
ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it would be perfect with his
Sure.
brother, his soulmate.
Uh,
But he was probably gonna take over for a while before the announcement.
mhm.
Um, so in terms of the shield, I think it's fine. And then I think it might even be good for Overwatch 2 as a franchise and as an individual game to have more fresh blood. Now, Aaron Keller did work at Blizzard even for the same amount of time as Jeff Kaplan. But I think Aaron Keller, while still being a very important figure, I think he's less, um, in a way, bullheaded. And no insult to Jeff Kaplan, he was a very important figure, and he made the Overwatch team strong and what it is.
Sure.
But I think Aaron Keller, might, this is speculation, but he might provide the opportunity for more conversation within the development team, better exploring of ideas, and also not holding out too hard for the perfect content, right? They might be okay. We want to make it this great game, but it's got to get out to the players eventually. He's gone on record in an AMA as saying that they want and are developing for a constant heartbeat for after launch of Overwatch 2, which means no more of the sequel stuff. It'll just be constant releases for new updates that
Okay.
will probably be free based on the current content model. Um, so I wouldn't say there's anything to worry about. Of course, it's a shame that it got delayed.
Mhm.
There definitely is a world in which it wasn't delayed, where COVID didn't happen, and there were never these deep set environmental issues at Blizzard, or at least it wouldn't have been delayed as much. Honestly, probably not at all. Um, but I don't think it's a marker of the content being worse. I think it's simply an adjustment that takes time. And I think I think we don't even fully comprehend the scale of what they're trying to do with their PvE. I think it's so massive that it took way more time than even they might have thought, because there was so much raw work that they had to do, just time spent. You can have all
Right.
the ideas, you can have it all designed out, but sometimes you just got to spend the
Just
elbow
got to
grease
work.
to
Yep.
get it made, right?
Mhm.
And that takes a lot of time. So I'm not worried about the final product. I think at least on the PvE side, it'll be really fun. I'm really looking forward to it. And then if Metro's leaks are true, then um, they finished the PVE pretty much, and around the time they announced 5v5, they actually started getting to work on the PvP because they did. It looks like they basically hadn't put as much focus, if any focus on it. It was just basic stuff. Like maybe it
Sure.
was 10, 15 people doing basic stuff for it.
Okay.
Now it looks like more of the might of a full development team, which means that it'll be way faster progress. That's what I'm hoping for
We
anyway.
hope
We'll
so.
have to
There's
see. We'll
there's
have to
some
see
developer
whenever it
jokes
was.
there, but okay.
Huh?
Um, I was gonna say there's some developer jokes there about adding more people doesn't necessarily make it faster in terms of how they have to work together, but that's
Oh,
that's that's fine. So let's talk PvP PvE a little because I think we've talked a lot of PvP, and I think you touched on what could be a bright spot here. What do you see as the value of PvE? Do you see that's gonna bring in a
that's
bunch
gonna
of
be so good.
casual? Is that gonna get people into Owl? Are people who loved PvP gonna love it? Like, what do you see there? What should we
Oh.
look forward to?
I've like because PvP is kind of a sore spot because I know at least for me it'll make the game more fun
Okay,
from where the game is now.
sure.
So I'm just kind of butthurt having to wait for it.
Okay.
PvE though, I'm I'm just excited. So, um story, I love the lore, I love the characters. Like going back and watching the cinematics because I am starved for Overwatch content is
Of course.
lovely. I was reading the newest update to the comic earlier, and
Oh yeah.
I loved it. It was pretty great because I'm a content lore fiend. I love world building, and it's literally a world. Like their world building is great. I love the characters. The voice acting is incredible. I'm looking forward to how they tie in all the character relationships. I want to see some interactions between Sigma and every other character because I
Hmm.
love Sigma as a character. I love Crazy Scientist.
Okay.
My ideal fantasy, right, besides having a Sigma raid boss, is having Echo copy Sigma, but the other personality of whatever Sigma is at the time, and having a conversation with like they can actually communicate. So you have the
Okay.
nice Sigma talking to the asshole Sigma in a cinematic, and they're just having a conversation because it's a true copy. It's like they get to explore all the cool stuff and really flex all their muscles in terms of lore and story and characters.
So
And
you
then
think
you've got
do you think we're going to be plot heavy for PvE? Do you think we're going to be like daily quest repetitive stuff heavy for PvE? Like talk to me a little bit more about what you see here.
so story is the meat content in terms of like basically the viral stuff.
Mhm.
I'm so blurry now, but I don't know how to fix it. Here, let's do the YouTube thing. Did that work? I think it's worse now. I'm
Seems a
I
little
am
worse, but that's
I
life.
am gone within the void. I am here, but I am not.
We'll just blame
So
school internet. You know the drill.
I just don't know how to work my camera.
No,
Um,
no, it's the school internet. Your camera's fine.
okay, it's the
I don't know
school
that.
internet.
I'm kidding.
The school internet, which is 800 gigabytes or gigabytes, no, megabytes per second.
Yeah.
Um, so the primary viral stuff that everybody will talk about and want to play first will be the story mode content. It looks
Yep.
like they might add talents, but either way, there's a lot of cool stuff. I subscribe to this interactions YouTube channel
Okay.
for all the Overwatch interactions. There's a lot of stuff that even I, playing the game for a lot, have not heard. God damn, I'm so blurry. I have not heard. Um, and it's really cool to hear pretty much, no, actually. So, if you guys don't know, Moira did all of the dumb, like all of the ethically bad stuff. I'm removing swears.
Okay. Good.
God, I'm a good boy now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Um, so Moira did all of the bad stuff. She's the one who brainwashed Sigma with the music. She brainwashed Widowmaker to kill her husband and made her blue so she could slow down her heartbeat so she's a better sniper.
Yep.
She did the thing to Reaper. She of course did the thing to herself. She's a natural manipulator. Um, and literally every single character. Like, there's interactions between villain characters and hero characters,
Right.
like Tracer and Widowmaker. They're a little bit snarky to each other. You've got Hanzo and Doomfist interactions. You've got Junkrat and Hanzo, right?
Sure.
There is not a single character that gets the same amount of pure, seething hatred and snarky remarks than Moira does.
Sure.
Every time, and she's being polite too.
Yes.
She's talking to Mercy, offering, "We would love to see your work in Oasis," and then Mercy just says, "Your work is an insult to science." And it's every single character in Overwatch and in Talon,
Hmm.
like good guys and bad guys, that hates the hell out of this character. Reaper says, and okay, I don't know if I quote. Reaper says, "Why am I subject to this agony?" And then Moira responds, "Sorry, I only saved your life." He is like a big boss in Talon. He despises her. It's
Yep.
hilarious.
Yep.
And I'm expecting a lot of more. So back into the story part, because that was a tangent. I just love that
Sure.
stuff.
Sure. Sure.
Um, I feel like they're gonna really explore the dark side of Moira as a character and the horrific experiments that she inflicts on living creatures. And then you've got, of course, Null Sector. So you've got more Talon agents. Most, I'm assuming, a good portion of which will be like Moira Messery, sensory.
Okay.
And then another portion of would be something else. And then you've got Null Sector, which is a big, they're expanding all. You got the Polar and all that other stuff.
Right.
And then it's basically been tease confirmed by the developers. First of all, we don't know what the Shimada clan is up to. Secondly, okay, this is the Sombra hero trailer thing. She gets discovered by this organization that isn't any of the organizations we know. It doesn't have a name. It's that eye, and that eye has connections to literally every organization we know. So what
Okay.
are they? Maybe they're a whole nother set of enemy units that we don't even know about.
Sure.
So the story will be the main meat, all the surprises, all the twists. They have gone on record to saying that they are not averse to actually killing off a character in the lore.
Okay.
And then you've got the hero missions with infinite replayability, or near infinite, right?
Okay.
With the Borderlands level talent trees for every single character. You've got 3 talent trees for every character, and you can mix and match forever, like as much as you want, up to a certain credit limit, right? That's a lot of content on its own.
Sure.
And then you've got semi-randomized plus difficulty plus different environment hero missions for the different maps plus different modes for the different maps.
Okay.
Like, you see how this is multiplying out to be a monster amount of content, right?
Yeah. No, I could see how this would be a monster amount of content. I could see that.
Plus the
Okay.
different enemies,
Okay.
right?
And what does this mean? Does this mean like why is this good for Overwatch's health in general? Is
Yes.
this good for Owl? Talk to me about the upside. Go ahead. Make the
Okay.
case.
First of all, it's gonna be fun. I
Good.
like play game.
Yeah.
I like variety.
Sure.
So whenever I play game, I like to do new thing. Overwatch not have new thing, so I like be able to go in and do new thing whenever. Um, that's good. A lot
Okay.
of people are going to enjoy that. Plus the characters and being able to indulge, and it's multiplayer, so you can play with your friends, which
Okay.
is also a big, great thing. Which means that the casual place will be boistered. It'll also draw more people into the competitive side, just casually competitive, like in quick play or hardcore, like you relaxed in PvE and then you go hardcore. You'll also have speedrunners, which is an underrated part of
Sure.
content.
Sure.
You can't speedrun Overwatch. One of the most popular speedruns is speedrunning the training range.
Hmm.
And it's actually pretty funny how well they've done it.
Of
Like,
course.
they've mathed out, like, okay, I'm going to fire strike this one bot as I walk back to spawn to switch to this other character so I can kill them slightly faster, right? Because
Love it.
you gotta kill every bot with every character.
Love it. Okay.
Um, So imagine, the dream levels of popularity. You pull that into Overwatch with so many different ways to speedrun. You've got hero missions. You'd be like, speed run the hardest difficulty of North America as fast as you can.
Sure.
And
Okay.
then there would be world speed runs, and then Europe speed runs, and then you've got story speed runs on the hardest difficulty, and also a little bit of context. You remember the 2019 PvE missions?
Yep.
Do you watch the gameplay and how on the hardest difficulty our streamers got rolled?
Yeah.
That was the second hardest difficulty.
Good.
They didn't give us access to the true hardest difficulty because they knew we would get trashed.
Okay.
So there's a harder difficulty beyond that, not to mention the talent trees. So there is not only constant casual intrigue, there will be constant content for like, this hero mission. In this, what's the best hero combination and talent combination to beat this as fast as possible? There
Sure.
will be speed runs of like Overwatch League teams or teams of people who aren't even in pros just destroying the games and making it like everybody would want to watch that. At least I would love to watch that. It's super satisfying to watch people play your game really well. That's why
Sure.
competitive even exists.
Sure.
I mean, and then of course, all of that casual content plays into the competitive side where, people love to see people doing the best at their thing. It just feeds into each other, right? The PvE plays into the PvP, and the PvP plays into the PvE, where okay, PvP is probably going to be free to play. I'd be
I mean,
shocked if
they've
it wasn't.
told us effectively, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Same
Yeah, it's
page.
going to be free to play, which will draw people into the PvE. People will, even if they don't like the PvP, they will stay for the PvE. And if they like both, like me, they'll just stay. They'll indulge in everything. All they'll do is play Overwatch. All they'll talk about in gaming circuits
Right.
will be Overwatch, which will spread the image, which will spread the branding. And then you've got so much content creation potential outside of that, plus the constant funding. You not only get the big boost from what is probably going to be a $60 PvE game, and
Sure.
it deserves to be that because it's going to be massive.
Okay.
But you've also got the change in development style for the updates afterwards,
Hmm.
which I don't know about hero missions. I'm curious about the PvE side. I'd be surprised if they did it in the DLC method because I don't think that's Blizzard's style.
Do you feel
Um,
like they're prepared to keep up though? Like they've told us, hey, we're, ready to have content continue to come out afterwards. Do we feel like they're prepared? Like Blizzard games are a lot more polished than what we think of as their competitors in the arena shooter or survival type game space, right? Like they're a lot more polished. There's a lot more voice lines of Widow talking to Tracer, talking to Sombra, all those things. So like that release cycle try to compete with a League, an Apex, a Valorant, like do we really think they're prepared to do that, or do we expect them to stumble?
it really depends on how they approach it.
Okay.
Um, they of course have a bigger team, which means that they'll have more people to divvy up onto different projects,
Sure.
which could release in a cycle. Um, if I were to throw out an example, right? If you were to
Sure.
have big PvE content be bi-yearly, like twice a year,
Hmm.
every 6 months, and then you have a hero every 3 months, and then you have smaller events, you could just by reusing the content you have, you could
Hmm.
already do a lot with that. Not to mention the type of variety. Like one of my favorite ideas for pull it back. Not didn't work. Um, nope. Doesn't do anything. Whatever.
Okay.
Now you get to see everything.
Okay.
Um, so one of my favorite ideas is a Sigma raid boss. So of course you've got the normal raid boss, big health pools. Maybe you've got different like objectives because he's going to be floating around. Maybe in the start he's just throwing his normal hyperspheres. Right, he does a lot of damage. You get him down 20%, and then he starts floating in the air and causing gravity. And then you get him down another 20%. He's orbiting rocks around him and tossing them at you. Once he gets down to 20% health, um, and this isn't even including all of the like map geometry where things could be crumbling around you, right? He
Sure.
uh, he basically goes black hole mode. Everything goes dark, and then you drop, and it's kind of an event where if you're not above 75% HP, you insta die.
Okay.
Um, and you can do a lot of creative stuff with that in the
Sure.
PVE side, and then you can have it be okay. Um, if you beat Sigma, you get one extra character. Or an easier example is there's a raid boss like that where you have to fight this new big enemy character.
Okay.
And this character needs to be beaten like 1 million times within a certain amount of time from the entire player base to get an extra character at the same
You
time
can do the
if
events.
it's
Yep.
if it's properly cleared, which would
Okay.
be incredible publicity, super exciting, really thrilling. There would be so much content. Everybody would be talking about it because you could get another character on top
Right.
of the character you're already getting, and you're fighting the character you're getting. It's the perfect mashup.
I hear you. Okay. Okay.
So it really depends on how they approach it. Obviously, it's way easier to come up with these ideas than to make them into a
Sure.
game, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were partly planning for that already with their size. Because as you said, adding people doesn't always make it faster. But if you have a whole bunch of different people on different projects, in a way, it is more efficient in that way because, well, you've got more projects at the same time, so you can make more content updates.
I hear what you're saying. Okay. So I think this is probably a good place to start to, sort of tie this all together and wrap up kind of the Overwatch 2 discussion. So I'll sort of, if I look at this from a conclusionary standpoint, you're really looking forward to this and you're seeing, hey, there's going to be stronger individual agency, which is good. We get rid of the tank variants that you get from Synergy because they have the most total difference. We get rid of some of the most annoying gameplay aspects and stuns, which again creates more individual agency there. So like the game is going to feel more controllable for an individual player is sort of like the big overarching, one of
Mm.
the big overarching points I'd say.
Skill-based gameplay.
What's that?
Skill-based gameplay.
Right, skill-based gameplay, sure.
Skill-based
Then we're
gameplay.
gonna have like we shouldn't be worried about the development cycle. Some bad things happened, yes, but this team is ready. They've given us some good tidbits that lead us to believe that they're ready. And we've got some awesome PVE ahead of us, which is going to be great for the environment. I think that sort of covers what we've talked about here. Is there any other area that we haven't touched on that you feel is important that people should be hyped about for the future of Overwatch 2?
They're looking at the competitive system from the ground up. They're going to be changing it. They've
Okay.
asked themselves questions like, how can we make each season feel individual?
Okay.
This is gone on record. You can find a Your Overwatch
Yep.
video about it. If I'm not reading chat because it distracts me,
Totally
but
fine.
chat, if you can't find these videos, if you want links, I'll give them to Temporal and then he'll post them somewhere.
I
That's
can
up to him.
post them in the video. I've already linked your Twitter in the video description below. People make sure to check that out. Drop
Yeah,
a follow for Max there so you can see what
yeah.
he's up to and see
I
when he's
post
sharing
very
his takes
important
about
content.
what's going on. There you go. What's that?
I post very important
He,
content.
he does. Very important
There's,
contact.
there's nothing to talk about right now, so I'm just
Okay.
posting dumb stuff.
It's okay.
Anyway, they're fully exploring competitive seasons, making each season feel unique and special
Okay.
from each individual season. They're exploring how you can make the middle and the end and the start of the seasons feel unique and special,
Yep.
which is already really cool. And then, of course, the competitive system can be looked at from the ground up. They will be what else? Uh, can you say the thing that prompted all this in the first place? It'll remind me.
I was giving you sort of the
Other
main
things.
topics that we'd covered. We talked about, hey, more individual control over it. We talked about, hey, the development cycle issues shouldn't really concern us because they've have it under control. And we talked about the PVE is going to be legendary and that's going to be great for the ecosystem. Those were sort of the broad categories that we've covered.
Um, and you were asking about other things to be excited about. I started with they're changing PvP clans. clans.
Yep.
They're adding clans. There's clans. We don't. It's
I
a
mean, I
braided
hear you.
wide
Okay. Yeah.
clans project. There's
Okay.
going to be crossplay with clans. There's going to be clans. I mean, I don't know much about clans myself. I never participated in anything that had clans, but it's a massive undertaking. I think it'll roll out like we've been asking for clans for a while.
Sure.
We know clans is a fact because there was a screenshot. So there was gameplay 2019, 2020 of, talents, and they blurred the top right. There was an accidentally unblurred image that was posted, and they said it like clan something. I think it was clan C9 or something. I don't know, something like that.
Sure. Sure.
C9 probably didn't even know that was happening. They just were clan C9.
Okay.
So we know that's happening. It's probably going to come with Overwatch 2, which is big enough on its own. Um, Frequent content updates.
Sure.
Now we say frequent, right? Frequent asterisk asterisk soon TM quotation marks parentheses.
Glad you got the disclaimers. Yep. Yep.
Um,
Acknowledging that we've heard that before. Sure.
yeah, but we get at least we know that content updates are coming, and that's better than we have for the entirety of Overwatch 1.
Okay.
Um, Bigger community support. Just people enjoying Overwatch. Your friends are coming back. Your friends.
Yeah,
Your friends
potentially.
last
I mean, they'll
Overwatch.
check out Overwatch 2 again, and if it's good, they'll stick. And if the
Yeah,
PvE is good, that can help it stick. Yeah, no, I see it. I think we've covered it mostly here, and I think
pretty
we can
much.
probably head into a wrap up. I think the final thing I do is just sort of a more general chance to talk about you, yourself, etc. Again, I linked your Twitter in the description below. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Because you exist. You might be doing some in the content creation world. You might want to talk more about your university because we have a collegiate audience, and you might want to go, hey, we're doing some recruiting, we're awesome, or hey, you should follow our team because we play like this. Anything you want to share or talk about and wrap up here?
Um, well, because there's a chat and this is a live stream, if anybody has any questions before we wrap
Sure.
up real quick, feel free to post it.
So,
I have it open now.
okay.
And while that's happening, I'm going to plug the Twitter in the description. I have a YouTube channel that doesn't really have much content.
Okay. I was gonna
I'm
say I can
developing a
add that to the
content
description
creation
if you like.
plan.
Okay.
Um, Honestly, just follow my Twitter if you're interested. You'll probably see it on there
They'll
because I
find their
will
way into
post
your
the
ecosystem,
content,
exactly.
right? Yeah. I'm doing a thing. It's a little hard to make content right now. A lot of my content is speculative based on the content creator NDA meeting. Something
Hmm.
will probably be coming within the next 1 to 2 months.
Sure.
And um and then all that it'll be way easier, but I will be making content, different styles. If you want to, I also have a Discord channel. Tempo, you're in the Discord channel, so if
I
anybody
am.
wants to join my Discord, you can message me up anytime. I'm happy at any time to give advice if you want to learn a skill. I know about the game, I know about mechanics. I can give you advice if you're feeling frustrated, any of that stuff. Um, so
For sure. Maxwell's
just reach out.
definitely very good at the game and a very good thinker about the game. Good
And
thinker, good hard worker.
I'm also open to doing VOD reviews too. Stream VOD reviews could be pretty interesting. Just exploring things, exploring different ideas. I'd love to help anybody who's interested out.
Okay. So it looks like we've got some questions here coming in from Akvod, specifically around like Talon and how does it
All
work for
right.
PvE with Talon? Are they going to be NPCs? Are you going to get to play as Talon? How do you think that's going to work? Or what do we
Um,
know that maybe I don't know?
how do you think they should handle story modes for PvE and Talon non-Talon split? Honestly,
Hmm.
one thing that I thought about, um, if they were to do like if they wanted to do separate stories right? One thing you could do, you've got Overwatch, why not make talent? But in terms of talent, I think they've gone as saying that honestly, it's a very good question. They'll probably make use of archives because archives is already solidified.
Okay.
You could have, story missions that are played from the other perspective.
Sure.
Um, you got the Overwatch agents on one side. It could be a thing where maybe in the future, because Overwatch may be a constantly evolving universe, um, they could have, Talon content update, Overwatch content update, where they counter what Talon did, and then a counter null sector update where you play as null sector characters. Um, and then you've got miscellaneous with Junkrat and Roadhog and Hanzo just grabbing money or something. I don't know.
Sure. Sure. The pirates, the independents. I get it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just imagine Hanzo goes through all these soul searching journeys. You've got the villains on one side
Sure.
offering to like Talon, Doomfist, Reaper offering Hanzo to join, bringing back the Shimada clan. And then you've got Genji being a supportive brother and allowing, I want you to be your best self.
Sure.
And then he ends up going with the Junkers because they seem like fun and they steal money. That'd be a really funny anticlimactic ending for a story arc.
There you go. There you go. Could work. I don't know that we can let people's story arcs end though, and I think that would be a complaint that some people have had. Where like, if you're not following the outside media content outside of the game, it feels like the game has stayed pretty still. The plot hasn't really evolved, and it's hard to do character-driven narratives when characters aren't allowed to evolve or
Are
can
you
only
talking about
evolve so
Overwatch
far.
2 right now?
Okay. Okay.
Are you talking about Overwatch 2?
Well, no, I'd say that's true about Overwatch 1.
Yeah,
So I'm
Overwatch
saying
1
for
doesn't have a
Overwatch
story mode.
2, we're going to have a
and,
story
and
mode and things get to evolve, but once it's ended, it's kind of hard to keep going because characters
so
have gone through their growth, right?
if you think about it in a different way,
Okay.
Overwatch 1 interactions are non-canon.
Okay.
There was a really funny running joke by a guy named Stir,
Sure.
aka Star underscore, that Lucio did not exist.
Okay.
He was convinced that Lucio did not exist, convinced,
Okay.
because everything in game in maps and and in interactions are not necessarily canon. So
Oh,
all of the interactions with Lucio are not canon. And then I don't even know if there are any posters for Lucio. The
there
only
are.
thing that confirmed him, yeah, but even that might not be canon. It's
Okay.
like, they could easily retcon it. So every single interaction, like the only thing that confirmed Lucio as real was the 2019 real story mode, but the game's not even out yet, so he could still not exist, and that was just an elaborate ruse, and Lucio still doesn't
Uh,
exist. You
okay.
never know.
Okay. I hear
You
you.
never know.
I hear you. Fair. Fair.
Yeah, so on Akavod's point, Talon's probably not going to get played much. It'll focus on Overwatch characters, but I don't know. It's their game.
Okay.
You might be able to play a few characters. They said that they might not be able to bring every character in. Maybe you'll be able to play as Talon for some story because it's a story mission, but it's from Overwatch's perspective. I don't know.
Okay.
That's the end of that.
If
Um,
if you want to take more questions here, I see someone wants us to unpack the whole is Overwatch still going to feel like Overwatch thing, which I think we did earlier in the discussion, and someone else wants to ask about getting
I
on
kind of
teams.
I want to roll through the questions.
Please.
Hey, I reached 4460 this season, and I'm struggling to find a good 4400 or 4500 team. Any advice on how to get to contenders? I haven't joined the Overwatch server yet.
Well, you're not ready for contenders yet. I can tell you that much. Sorry, but isn't it
So,
cute? Sorry, go ahead.
um, honestly, the team aspect of Overwatch is the most difficult aspect of Overwatch. You are good at that at least a fundamental level, probably because you have reached 4460. 4460 is when you're pretty solidified in team and individual play. So what I would recommend is there's a couple core concepts that you want to remember if you want to pursue pro. And honestly, now is not a bad time to start to learn this stuff because Overwatch 2 is on the horizon. wherever the hell that horizon is.
Oh,
Um,
I'm squinting. I see it.
I would,
It's over there. Sorry, continue.
so Overwatch. Uh, I'd recommend you don't ever have standards for your team play. You want to. It's the fundamental of stoicism. Don't let things outside of your control affect how you feel. So you ignore that. You get onto the best team you can, and then your other thing you want to focus on is being a good teammate. Right? You want to be a good teammate. You want them to feel comfortable, like you're amiable, like you're a good friend. Basically, don't let the competitiveness consume you and your goals and your aspirations to win, right? Regardless of how good you are, even if you're the best person on the team. Forget about that, right? Focus on the friendships and focus on like what you can do as an individual. My dichotomy is friendships and showing off. I don't have to have a really good team to show off, and the friendships of the other part of the team, then you just have good relationships, right? So you don't have high standards, and then you focus on those aspects. Over time, you're going to learn what's it like, how to tell a good team from a bad team. Just kind of getting yourself in there, starting with the best team that you can get. Even if like you can offer, if there's a team that's full, but they look like they have a good team or a good environment, people you'd like to spend time around, you can learn from, offer to be a seventh man. At the very least, you get to see how it works. Maybe you get some playtime. If you don't, you can leave. It's pretty free flowing. You don't have to sign contracts. So you don't have to force yourself into loyalty. And if you end in an amiable relationship, it'll always be worth your time.
And I would go pretty
So,
heavy on that. Like if you're not signing contracts, you want to be pretty mercenary in terms of, hey, I'm looking for the next better offer. And playtime is better than not playtime. Like that is going to be a thing because you need the rest of the scrim scene to see you. Don't stab people in the back. Definitely don't be like, hey, I'm going to just hang you guys out to dry, but you do want to pretty quickly be willing because you're not, as a player with no scrim experience or no meaningful scrim experience, going to be getting invites to the teams that are the trials level teams. It's just not
or
going to
even if you
happen.
do have that experience, because for me, I'm a very emotional guy.
Sure.
I've dealt with that my entire life. And one thing that I really struggled with was that I care so much, right? So from my perspective, I just care a lot, and that's a good thing, right? But it came off as irritation and frustration primarily. Um, and so that left a bad taste in my teammates' mouth. And one thing you got to remember is that some of your best opportunities are going to be from your acquaintances, not even your best friends, your
Right.
acquaintances, because you'll know more acquaintances, and
Soft contacts are great.
they'll played with you. They thought you were good. They got this really cool opportunity and they need your role. They think you're good. You're a good teammate. So they'll trial you. That opens up opportunities that open up more opportunities. It just kind of scales out. That's why you can see some people rise the ranks so highly, while other players that are really fundamentally good at the game might struggle. Cough, 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 cough. Um, I'm kind of using Overwatch 2 as my, breakout from that. But right now, it's a really good opportunity to learn
Okay.
that. Akvad, I don't know how much time here, but I don't want to hold people too long, just in case. So Akvad, I wonder how the character selections and leveling system will work with PVE. I don't know.
I think we've addressed a fair amount of Akvad. Like Akvad was
Um,
sort of actively chatting, sort of as you were going through
yeah, yeah,
your
yeah,
view of
yeah,
PVE, and I
for
think we've
sure.
covered that. I
I was
think
reading through it,
Akvad's
the
new
character
question
conversation.
of like not been paid is something that might make sense to answer. And in my experience,
COOs.
the answer to that is it's almost certainly a case of how the org filled out the form where the money went, and then is the org holding the money. It's almost certainly that based on what I've seen. Blizzard is pretty good. Blizzard will do the things that big companies do of like, we're going to pay you guys 90 days late because we can, net 90 terms, which is a very common thing for big companies to do to sort of
Yeah,
abuse little companies, but it's
that's
standard business practice. But they're not going to not pay someone for half a year. Like,
mhm.
that's not really going
It's
to
kind
be
of
a Blizzard
about
move. That's going
it's
to be a
about reading the fine print of your contract.
right.
I'm fortunate to have a smart business dad and a lawyer friend. Um, if so, I just you take note of the people who have the experience of reading out contracts, and then you need, read through, get used to reading through contracts because it can be there's a lot of jargon. They literally list off words to make sure they have everything covered, which is a pain in the butt to read through. But it's worth the time to make sure that you're signing a contract that won't screw you over. There's a lot of stuff that can go under the radar. Like, for example, signing away the rights to your name was what got Prince in trouble, to where he became big, but this company had the rights to his name. So everything with his name on it, they would get money from. So he went instead by the artist formerly known as Prince to get around that. It was a loophole.
Yeah.
So pay attention to that if you're ever going to sign a contract.
Sure.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how do you guys feel about 2022 in Overwatch? Well, I'll start and let Temple
Sure.
go. Overwatch from so there's gonna be stuff. I have no idea what that stuff is. Only the content creators know. I have some guesses.
Hmm.
I want to get into the speculation after Temporal's opinion, but from at least the hard evidence of what we have, I'm looking forward to. I always love the archives because they're a great time waster, even if they're the same thing over and over again.
Sure.
Um, Overwatch 2 PvP, Overwatch League is going to be really fun to watch. I love that. I'm going to be watching it all the time. Every single game, even the APAC, which I don't normally watch.
Hmm.
Um, and then from the content creator perspective, every single freaking one of them was happy. It
Yeah.
was crazy.
Not really, in my opinion, but go ahead. It's very like there's stuff that they can do that would make them very happy because it's in their self-interest. And the most
I
obvious
know.
example of that, you know what the most obvious example would be. It would be the Valorant style, hey, let's make people watch big content streamers of our game that isn't out yet to get beta access
Well,
keys.
here's the
And
thing.
wouldn't you just love it? Wouldn't you love being in that meeting if you were a content creator and they were telling you that they're going to force a bunch of viewerships your way?
I mean, absolutely. There's two things.
Sure.
One, it's a good sign that they're willing to do that for the general health of the game. Two, that means there's going to be closed beta access keys for Overwatch 2,
Sure.
which means I might get one,
Okay. Okay.
and then that also means that there's going to be more updates and more communication, more transparency because they have a new PR division. I don't know if you read the stylus of tweets, but
Yeah, I did. That was
the
painful
PR
to read, but
division,
not terribly surprising.
the PR division at Blizzard was the primary reason, besides other systemic problems, that there has been such a lack of communication for all these years. Speculation, a little bit, but it seems pretty heavy in that. And so, over the John Spector,
Hmm.
uh, former basically director, but it was whatever. The title didn't
Sure.
matter. He was basically the head of the Overwatch League. In the year when Overwatch got no content, their viewership got better by a significant amount.
Yep.
Is now the commercial lead of Overwatch,
Yep.
which spells a good thing for the franchise as a whole and for communication. Plus, another now former Overwatch League employee who is pretty high up on the career list at the Overwatch League
Sure.
is now the head of PR at the Overwatch team,
Hmm.
which means that there will be less barriers and better communication to everybody.
Okay.
And even just that, from somebody as starved as myself for everything in terms of Overwatch, content, updates, communication, anything, literally anything, it's a good change of pace. And
Sure.
so 2022 is going to be like 2021 was the worst year for Overwatch, besides how some metas played in 2020, which was also pretty bad. 2022 is going to be a great increase, and I'll let you go, Temple, before I get into predictions.
Oh no, I don't. I think it's fine. I mean, I'm definitely not as gung ho as you about 2020. I think some of the stuff I've seen has raised my hopes here in terms of, hey, it looks like they have something more stable. I've seen some things that are good news, and my answer here is definitely, a higher number than it would
Oh,
have been
okay.
even 2 months ago. But I
Okay.
do look at it and I still go, hey, I'm still not convinced that we're getting a release, and if we're not getting a release, I think our content is going to be limited. So I don't see how I can go much higher than like a 4 out of 10, 5 out of 10 on it.
So
Yeah,
here's my prediction.
yeah,
Get it on record.
good.
My prediction. So I don't know about the timetable. They're probably going to be, the PvP stuff will be released to the pros and probably by extension the player base within the next month or two,
Okay.
because they need practice time. Worst case scenario is a month before Overwatch League starts.
Hmm.
Um, and then Overwatch League starts, of course, based on how happy the content creators were. This is my prediction, like an honest prediction.
Okay.
Um, Around sometime in the beginning, early-ish beginning of the Overwatch League season, content creator closed beta drops start happening for Overwatch 2.
Okay.
And that kind of thing happens for a bit with content creator collaboration content for Overwatch 1, plus the
Right.
normal events, until the grand finals of the Overwatch League, in which there is another presentation and the release date of Overwatch 2 is announced.
Okay. Okay.
So my final grade for 2022, um, yeah, that's what I was saying. That's what I was just thinking, Akvad. You were reading my mind. It's a little bit harder if you're thinking on a curve compared to other years. Um, Compared to other years, like good years. Well, if I were to say that 2020 or 2021, around that area was a 1, I'd say besides the release of Overwatch, it'd be like pretty much yeah, I'll just give it a score. It's like an 8.5. It's just
Okay.
an 8.5.
Heavy hitter there. 8.5. But I see it. I see it.
8.5 because it's a good change of pace and there might be more coming. I just want stuff. That's all I want. I'm very easily pleased when it comes to Overwatch content because I have been starving for so long.
Okay. So
But
you're just
if I were to
really
frame it
excited.
in respect to the Overwatch 2 release, and if Overwatch 2 wasn't going to get released this year, it would go down to like a 6. It's a 4.5 if I don't get a key, and it's an 8.5 if I do.
There you go. There you go. Very self-interested view, but I get it. I get it. Okay. We've probably got time for maybe one more question here, and then I think we call it here. Unless Max, do you have anything in particular you want to pick out that you already see there, or any last final thing you want to
No,
cover
just
here?
thanks for coming, watching the
Oh,
podcast.
of
Thanks
course.
for having me on the podcast as well. I'm happy to do more of these, especially as more stuff comes out. We can make it regular,
Yeah, it
casual
was
conversational things. Thank
great
you
to have
guys
you.
for participating and being great, listening and everything. Um, I personally want to up my content stream. I'm figuring out
Good.
how to do that. It'll be way easier whenever there's more things to talk about. Um, if you guys have any ideas for what kind of stuff you'd like, maybe
Uh,
that's too general because you don't know my brand
Maybe.
anyway.
Yeah.
Whatever, I'll figure that
I don't
out.
know you,
And
but
then you guys join my. The only thing that I ask, not I mean, Twitter follow is okay, but I like to
okay.
get to know people.
Sure.
So I'd much like I'd very appreciate joining the Discord. You join the Discord, we can have a chat. You can ask me anything you like, whenever. We can talk about other things. So just join, and we can have a conversation. It'll be fun.
Okay. Once again, Max's Twitter is down there in the Discord. You can they message you through Twitter
In
if
the
they follow
description.
you, or you can send me the Discord info if you want me
I
to
I
send
have
it there. I
hardware
think you
limited
do.
myself to
Got it.
5 minutes on Twitter per
Good
day.
move. Good move.
Yeah, it's not.
I
It's
strongly recommend that.
to be up here.
Yeah.
So Discord guaranteed. I will respond every single time.
Got it. Then do you want me to put your Discord handle in the description there so that they know how to reach out to you?
Um, I'll just give you a permanent link to my Discord server.
That'll work as well. Perfect. Then if you
Mm,
send me that, I'll add that to the video when this is, well, I can probably live edit that now, actually. Why not? Uh, okay, that'll work. Yeah, we'll do that real quick. Just to grab that.
who would be the best coach to watch on Twitch or YouTube for a lower tier player? I don't know. I'll be honest, there's not much of that to go around, but it could be me. So here's the way I'll do this because it's still new. I haven't done one yet. There is no precedence, right? Brandon, join the Discord, and I will personally schedule out a time to where I will VOD review your VOD. Any VOD you like, any character, we can focus on anything you like, or I can just point out stuff. Because I'll be honest, I'm one of the best guys for this kind of thing. I've taught my teammates. I'm going to be teaching literal children how to play and with my esports program.
Oh, fun. You've got an
So,
esports program? Talk to me about that.
oh, my esports program, Converse Valkyries.
Got
Coincidentally,
it.
I'm wearing the thing.
Yep.
We're pretty good. We're looking to become really good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm team captain slash makeshift coach because we don't have one slash moral center. I'm just the guy.
You're part of it.
And then
Yeah, I get it.
I'm the guy. And then my teammates help me out as much as they can, and they're great.
Okay.
And my esports director is pretty awesome too.
Nice.
So join the server. I'm honestly the best guy for VOD review content. So give me VODs to review, and I'll review them with you live on content.
Okay.
I don't know if it'd be Twitch or YouTube yet.
All good. I hope to see more content from you in the future, Max. Maybe we'll get
Thank
you
you.
on here some more for some podcasts. I'll probably, if I have you back next, I'd probably have you back with a bigger panel rather than just one-on-one like this, because
Yeah,
I think we can bounce things a little more. Maybe we'll grab some people. Maybe they'll be from the collegiate scene, maybe contenders, maybe tier 3, but we'll grab some more people and
also
maybe do some of that.
conversationalist.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Okay. For that, that's
Also,
going to do it, guys. Make sure that if you enjoyed this content, please do drop a like. Consider subscribing if you haven't. I have linked Maxwell's Discord in the description below, as well as his Twitter. So if you like what you heard here, you want to hear more from Max, definitely join that Discord. He's, chatty in there, wants to have conversations, and he does have a good brain for Overwatch. So look forward to what you guys can do. And with that, it's going to be Temporal and Maxwell out.